every project I did before Her Demise had a rigid archetype to it, you know? Like, we are X, Y, and Z. You will not stray from this path of X, Y, and Z. When we write music, we write X, Y, and Z. This is how the music sounds, this is how it's gonna go. But that's not how I write music. I write music purely off of feeling. So if you box me into X, Y, and Z, oh man, I hit writer's block every 5 minutes because it's like my brain's trying to check all these boxes instead of just having fun doing it. Where, like, especially with Her Demise, like, if I wanted to go and write a song like Southern Comfort and literally just get on my guitar and like do this twangy Southern riff, no one's stopping me. No one's like, ooh, that's not really the vibe we're going for. And that's kind of why the takeover sounds like a mess. That's kind of what I'm explaining right now, if anything.
Real quick before we start, I just wanted to mention that we do these podcast recordings live on Twitch. It's kind of a cool way for you guys to be a part of the conversation, as well as see the behind the scenes and the uncut versions of these episodes. If you're watching on YouTube, subscribing, leaving a comment, liking the video, all that stuff goes a long way. Same goes for leaving a review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. We have a striving community on Discord if you want to chat with other like-minded deathcore enjoyers, as well as just staying up to date with everything that's going on with the podcast. Last but not least, if you want to support the podcast, I'll be leaving a link down in the description wherever you are watching or listening on how you can do so, as well as links to everything else that I just talked about. With that out of the way, enjoy this episode. Welcome to the Brutality Podcast. My name is Dom, and I'm joined as always by my co-host Yan. And today we have a really cool guest today. We've actually been talking with this dude for quite a minute. He's a supporter of the podcast to begin with, so it's always cool to be able to connect on that front too. But we've got Jake Anderson of many projects. A lot of people might know him from Her Demise My Rise. He was also a member of Ex-Carnifex for a bit back in the day, and he's got a lot of new music as of late. So hey, Jake. My man.
Hey, what's up,
doing,
Dom?
Man?
What's up, Yan? And what's up, chat? How's it going, everybody?
How you feeling today, man?
Good. Just, hanging out, making music, the regular stuff. Cool to see you both again, obviously. And and like you said, last time we talked was like I think a 12-hour Discord call. So
something like that. I mean, to be fair, I feel like we became friends after like 10 minutes or so, hey, and I was just like, okay, we're gonna hang out basically. But it was unreal for me. Really, it's very special when you meet someone you don't know, but you feel like you know a little bit simply because what he did or the art he was involved with was such a big part of your life. So it's very special because you don't want to be weird, but at the same time, it's just like, oh my God, that's so it was fun, but it was especially fun to hear your perspective, as opposed to just like see it as an ensemble. Like the behind the scenes is the most interesting. So.
Yeah, it was fun to talk about, and like I said, I always say thank you to you guys for preserving a lost generation of music. Essentially, when MySpace deleted all the music, it kind of wiped us off the internet for the most part. So even getting the conversation like that back into the conversation is really cool because I will say like Her Demise went from like maybe 500 monthly listeners, really down to like up to 2K in the recent, since that stuff came out and all that stuff. So it's like really cool to see like a new generation kind of get to hear some of the older stuff too. Cause I know that's mainly like the newer generation and like the deathcore resurgence kind of appreciating the old music and stuff like that.
Yeah, exactly. Like it was the whole point. If I'm honest, like we were talking this week I released the Red Shore. Like those. It's very important to me that it's not because the new generation don't want to know about it. They just don't.
Yeah.
Like they because like the spotlight is on Lorna and Slaughter, and to be fair, they all deserve it. It's awesome. But at the same time, to me, I'm like, you need to know, we need to include, you know, who was there before, you know, who paved the way to create this.
Yeah,
like,
you know.
like
a
Jake
lot of
said,
it's pre-YouTube too, so it's
right,
like
it's gone.
yeah,
It's all stuff that doesn't exist unless, and people will be quick to bring up Wayback Machine, and I get it, like we're on there every single day, it's chill, but it exists. But even then, it doesn't have everything by far. A and B, you kind of have to know what you're looking for, right? Like if you're not specifically looking for a band because you don't already know about the band, then you're not going to stumble upon this sort of stuff.
People aren't going to know.
The music is gone anyway, so it's going to like.
Yeah. People are going to know what inspired the next generation and the generation after that and stuff like that. Like bands like Misericordium, like, you know, kind of lost to time, but like something where I say like hugely influential to like I consider it like second gen deathcore, like, you know, the Carnifex, the Her Demises and stuff like that, where like those bands were hugely influential to us, like, and stuff that's just lost to time. I tell people Misericordium all the time and they're like, who? And I'm like, oh man, you got to check this stuff out.
But it's funny because we talk about Misericordium a lot with different people that we have on this podcast, right? So it's kind of to prove your point, right? Like I think a lot of people that were doing music back in that day, it's those kind of bands that they'll bring up, but people today don't even know that these bands exist, right? So it's cool to see the resurgence. It's cool to see that people, even younger people that's been our biggest surprise. We say it all the time, but younger people being interested in this new wave and in the old wave, I mean, of deathcore is always surprising to me. Like it's cool to see people being interested in the history and all this stuff.
Yeah.
When we started this podcast, we thought we would be surrounded by 30-plus-year-olds. Like we didn't think there'd be anyone younger than 30 years old listening to what we're doing. So it's cool. We feel it. We see it, you know, that a lot of people are kind of like thirsty to know like the history and all that stuff. So
especially because it's not only that, you know, they like it, but also they're interested. Like you see the younger people and they sometimes they even prefer the old stuff, you know, like they hear the old school deathcore and they're like, oh my God, that was actually, you know, like imagine a kid, for example, like he's, I don't know, like he or she's like 14 and they hear like Slaughter to Prevail, and sure, it's awesome, but like show them like We Are the End and they're just like, holy shit, like it's different. Like it's, you know, it's a old school, raw, lost art, and then it's coming back right now. So when I started the channel a long time ago, Her Demise My Rise was one of my first video, wasn't it? I think it was like one of my
early on, yeah.
Within like what, the first 5 or 6 of them you did?
Because I reached to you. I think you were one of the first people I've reached. I fully remember that because I told you, I'm like, dude, that's one of the first video I want to do, and then you were busy, and back then you're like, are you still interested? I'm like, fuck, dude, yeah, I'm still interested. But those videos were the one I was the most stoked about, because obviously I was happy to do Suicide Silence and all these huge bands, but people kind of know more about them. But doing We Are the End, doing Her Demise My Rise, doing Suffocate, all these bands that were huge, but at the same time not Suicide Silence huge type thing.
I was almost in your Suffocate video too, funny enough. When I left Carnifex, that was the band I originally was going to join. So that I would have been in that video too if I followed through, you know. But I ended up joining Her Demise instead. But that was originally the band I was going to after Carnifex was Suffocate.
Would have makes sense though, you know, if we take a look at what you
roots and everything.
I mean,
Well, we toured with a band called Legacy of Pain. I don't know if you remember them, but
it was before. It was a side thing with Suffocate, right?
Yeah, it was the guitar player, Lars the drummer, and then the singer, the original singer Jared. They got signed to Jamie Joss's label with that project, and we're kind of pushing that project because Suffocate was
shout out Jared, by the way, he's awesome.
So, but yeah, Suffocate was kind of on the down, and they were trying to do something new, so they did Legacy of Pain. And then those tours were rough, so I think they went back to Suffocate afterwards. Because I mean, those tours were rough. We were like sharing a van, so like you got to think 2 bands in a van type thing, you know. like 12
Right.
people in a 15 passenger.
And that wasn't the only time that sharing a van was brought up for you, right?
No, that was very common back in the day too. Like, you want to tour with these bands, not everybody has the means, and some of these bands are awesome. So you want to hit the road with them. So always
it's
did
crazy how people sometimes don't know the amount of efforts behind the scene. Like a lot of people are just like, if I think about myself, for example, like when I was 15, 16, in my mind, all the bands I love, like Suffocate, all these bands, big tour bus. In my mind, I was like, okay, they're traveling with these huge bus, and it's like it's the life. And then years later, I'm like, that was the van.
There were 12 dudes in a van. Yeah.
And when someone offered their floor to us, we're like, a floor? No way. Thank you so much. Like, because it was
inside.
like, yeah, exactly. A
Beside the litter
shower?
box? Sign me up.
Exactly. But yeah, we were roughing it, but it was like, we were doing it because we, obviously deathcore wasn't even really a genre back then. It was kind of still forming. So it was like,
Even
one of those things
hated almost,
it was, you got to think too, like I'm technically second wave deathcore, like I say. I'm from California, so I always consider bands like As Blood Runs Black, stuff like that, the first wave, Suicide Silence stuff. Because I was I was in high school when Suicide Silence put out their first EP. I was still in high school, so like I got to see that come up, but like I was still too young to be part of that circle, So I always consider what we did like second wave, but.
Well,
right, like you were influenced by those bands type of thing.
But we were mainly influenced by Orange County metalcore, like because I'm from the Inland Empire, which is Orange County is just like the county right next to us. So like we had Bleeding Through, which was symphonic, kind of blackened at times, super heavy breakdowns. We had 18 Visions right down the road. We had Atreyu. I saw like Atreyu play at like a train station as a local band, like they played like a hookah bar outside. Like when the train passed, you couldn't even hear them playing any,
I'm so jealous of that. Avenged Sevenfold, similar type of scenario too, right? Like I would have killed to have seen like those two bands specifically, I think. Like back in the day being like super small. Like
we didn't really have a lot of heavy deathcore influence like this, at least the second wave. Yeah, we listened to bands like As Blood Runs Black and stuff like that, but we were
close
already
to metalcore too.
Exactly. We were already super influenced by like Bleeding Throughs, and like one of my favorite bands is On Broken Wings. Like I always say they're one of the first deathcore bands because they were doing blast beats. He was screaming, doing like deathcore highs, but they were always considered more of a hardcore style, band. But I always consider them like first wave. One of my
there were a few bands like that were kind of crossover. Like Recon always gets brought up as well, right? Like they were like hardcore, but a lot of people that really fucked with deathcore fucked with those types of bands heavy as well, right?
And we toured like bands like that. Like we toured with Recon a ton and Carnifex. Like there was a big blend back then where like you do like a tour with Recon, then maybe a tour with A Plea for Purging, and then maybe we're on tour with Across 5 Aprils, if anybody remembers that band. But like a completely like pop band in comparison to everything else on the set. So like we toured with anybody and everybody because at the end of the day, we just like music. Like that was always the goal is, cool music, we're in, like Her Demise did tours with T-Mills,
I was about to say that. Thank you, by the way, for making me realize that my whole life I said T-Miles for some reason, and you showed me how to pronounce his name, which is
he didn't have a tag at the beginning of all his songs.
He did.
Okay. Pre SoundCloud rap didn't have as many. Yeah,
no excuse. Like the first thing I heard from him, my friend showed me. He made a cover. He called it Dirt Nap or something. Like it was like an old
Keisha cover he did.
He made an old, I don't know if it was like a real like an old old thing. And I was like, oh my god. But what I miss about those days is the scene was a blend. Like Never Shout Never was in the scene, and you had Carnifex. Like it was a big blend of everything.
And it was like the cool part is it's not like we didn't hang out with each other. Like we hung out with Christopher Drew quite a few times on Warped Tour, and he'd be like, "Oh, I dig what you're doing," and we're like, "We wish we can do what you're doing."
Can I ask you what phase it was? Because he went through a lot of.
It was right when he got. It was Warped Tour 2009, so it was right when he got
Prime.
The band. He was still playing, the the ukulele songs and stuff, you know, all the bangers.
But he was doing Hit Me While I'm Hot also, or not yet?
Yeah, he was starting to go more in that like kind of like full band, kind of Beatles-esque vibe, I guess. At that time was where he was he was right around there. But like we got to hang, like we kind of everything kind of blended because everybody who listened or played like softer stuff always appreciated the heavier stuff.
Well, dude, it was all scene kids, right? So it was all like, you know, we were all emo kids to start with, and then kind of transitioned into heavier music into deathcore. So I felt like those were always synonymous. Like it was it made for very eclectic groups of like people and different types of music that people were listening to. Like I always listened to emo and post-hardcore, but also deathcore and death metal and slam. It was always like, to me, there was always the two.
It was cool to see also. Like I always listened to Did You Remember back then, especially when they dropped the, Homesick and stuff like that. And you would see, I don't know, like the Devil Wears Prada, Miss May I, all these bands like just hanging out together. But then you see another picture and you've got like Austin Carlisle with Mitch Locker. It's super different styles, but they're just like they're hanging out. I don't know. I
you look at the two dudes and it makes sense, right? You're like, oh yeah, right. Like they could be brothers, you know. It's like
everybody seemed kind of approachable back in the day too. Because I even remember when I believe the Data Remember's first record was For Those Who Have Heart.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. So when that record came out, we were on tour and we were bumping that because if you really listen to that record, it's about being on tour. It was super relatable for tour guys to be listening to, you know?
Yeah.
So I remember even messaging them and being like, dude, this is like, we're bumping this every single day, and getting a message back. I think it was from either the guitar player or the bass player of it. I remember him being just like, lie to my face, you know, like he was like loving what Carnifex was doing. So I was like, oh, that's so cool. There's so much cross, you know, everybody's appreciating each other's art.
It was cool to see. Even the merch, you would see someone from 4 Years Strong, but with a Whitechapel shirt or something. Yeah. It was just cool to see that. I love that. Without saying it, everybody was on board with everything. It was just like, I listened to this and this, no problem. You know, it wasn't like you need to listen to this or whatever. Like just
that was the beauty of Warped Tour, right?
Yeah.
Like it brought so many genres together, and it worked because the people in that scene did enjoy multiple things, right? Because I think if it was super fragmented and people just listened to deathcore and then just you'd have these like random, like, you know, some stages would be full but maybe not for others. Like it would have been weird, right?
I'd go see Breathe Carolina and then go see The Cab and be like, oh, Amir's playing, I got to go see Amir next, you know, like it didn't matter, like,
it's awesome,
because those are all amazing artists to me.
Yeah, exactly. And I wasn't really thinking about that. Like now I know people are like, well, Amur technically not. Back in the days, I remember not even thinking about that. To me, it was just like, oh, it's Amur. Oh, it's Carnifex. Oh, it's Whitechapel. In my mind, I wasn't like, okay, so Amur is technical hardcore mixed with. I was just like, that's Amur. It's awesome, you know. So I feel like
music.
Yeah, just less oriented on trying to put things in a box and more like, do you like it? Yeah, it's awesome.
If you kind of look at where deathcore, I mean, minus like if you kind of sub out the symphonic stuff that's going out right now, a lot of deathcore bands of today took a lot from Amir, like, you know, more groove oriented, less blast beat, and just like straight aggressive, like Cannibal Corpse.
You feel it in metalcore today, like modern metalcore. Like there's so much of it that has like a kind of more of a groovy rap attitude to it. Yeah, that's like straight kind of Amur, like the more bouncy 100%, type of.
Yeah. But they for how hated they were when they came out, like they are definitely one of those bands that like. Appreciation over time, like they still have haters, but like they there's always one record someone can say, like, you know, you may not like their latest thing, but you know, Goodbye to the Gallows, you know, you appreciate it.
Well, I think most people will defer to Goodbye to the Gallows is sick and fuck everything else type of thing. Like people kind of like
Josh
gave
Travis
up on them
Amir?
Afterwards. Right, but but to your point, I think now people look back on Felony and all these other albums and they're like, oh, it wasn't that bad. Like why was I not fucking with it back in the day? Like people go back to these records and it's like, oh, like it works. Like it's not weird. I think it was
just a little bit of the herd mentality
different.
Back in the day too. Like you know, one person hated it, everybody was like on board with hating it, because you see it with like bands like Attila these days. Like everybody hated Attila back in the day, but people love Attila today. Like, and they have tons of fans. And
Yeah, I
they're doing their
remember
thing.
being called a poser because I was, you know, enjoying Rage and their albums. I was like, okay, I'm a poser. Who fucking cares? But at the same time, Immure, to me, they were just simply ahead of their time. Because when they dropped things like Children of Cybertron, whatever, like the album a little more Cybertron,
yeah.
like this was ahead of its time. It was just like, it was bouncy as shit, and it was early on. We're talking 2011. Some people are doing that now. Like they were just ahead on, and that's the curse of being ahead. I feel like people are just like, what is that? You know, and years after, oh wow.
I give it up to Jesse too. Jesse was we got to tour with Amir on Goodbye to the Gallows, so I got to hang out with those dudes a ton. And I always say I get Jesse, the guitar player who wrote those first couple records, or I think like first 4. Amazing writer, you know. Like I don't think Amir would have that sound, and you know they needed that archetype in that.
And I'm
band,
sure
so
Frankie
shout
would
out to Jesse.
approve. You know what I mean?
100%.
Like, so it's just, yeah. But Goodbye to the Gallows to me is still underrated though. When people talk about Immure, they don't bring it as much, but it was amazing.
The fluidity of that record from track to track, like you sometimes forget that you're on song 3 because you just pressed 1 and it just flowed through so beautifully. Yeah,
and it's perfect. It's so good to listen to. Like it's melodic, but not too much. Like this, like the perfect balance.
For me personally, like I really fuck with and I've been crucified for this before, I don't care, like I really fuck with like the bigger songs that came off of that album that everyone knows, but I kind of get lost in the slower, way more melodic stuff that they have on that album. But that's just like I don't know, it's just less my vibe, I guess. But there's like no denying that, like, you know, 10 Signs and like these songs are like cult classics. Like you can't talk about the genre without bringing up those songs. Like they were so genre defining back in the day.
One of the last eras too, where all the drums are real, all the guitars are real, all the bass is real. There's not a lot of MIDI tracking on those CDs, you know, so like
it sounds that way too, right? You can feel it, you can hear it.
Yeah, and that's its own energy, you know. That's something that, you know, sometimes I feel like it's a little lost in the music today, is like you lose some of that live energy you had, which stuff still sounds cool today. Obviously I put out stuff with MIDI tracking and stuff, but like, you know,
yeah,
like
it's just a different feel. Yeah,
I still go back to those CDs to try and find a way to get that real feeling, you know, like going back to those old records, going back to like I said, like On Broken Wings and stuff like that, and hearing how they were able to capture, because there's no cheating in that stuff. Like either they knew how to play it or it didn't get on the record. It's simple as that. It's not like you can just be like, oh, just quadruple the kick drums right there and make it really fast, almost impossible to play. And yep, that's going on the record. You know, if they couldn't do it live, it was pretty much game over.
I mean, drums were always a big part of it, because obviously drums were kind of like the first thing to go like MIDI, right? But I feel like guitar tone is like so wildly overlooked as well. Like I think that Immure album is a perfect example of, like, technically speaking, like you listen to that, like the guitar tone itself, it's kind of weird, but it's kind of what makes it good, and it's beefy as hell.
It's a mic'd up guitar tone too. It's not a straight in, you know, VST effect guitar tone.
And you can't duplicate that, right? Like I think a lot of people now, they kind of have, you know, tones or things on the recordings that sound like other things because it's all coming from the same place. Obviously you get to the top echelon, and obviously you got masters at their craft and people that also just still do real amps and stuff.
I believe
like
that one was recorded by
like,
Zeus too, if you know who producer Zeus is. So I mean, it makes sense why it sounds the way it does. You know, Zeus was always an expert at, you know, full live instruments, and did a lot. He did like Shadows Fall and stuff like that back in the day, if you don't know.
Yeah. A lot of stuff that sounded really raw, but sounded great.
Yeah, exactly.
Fascinates me though, because like it's something, by doing the channel and seeing the same names over and over, you know what I mean? Like the same producers, same people, you come to realize that it changes the entire thing. The people working behind the scenes have so much more impact than what people realize. Like the same album, the same band, everything would be completely different. Maybe you wouldn't even like it with a different producer. It's wild.
We're going through, I mean, we went through a little bit of that right now because we're writing the second Heaven Sender EP, and you know, different producers, you know, you give them your music, and different producers will do different things with it. So, and it's like one of those things where it's a challenge because it's like, ooh, do we pick the right person at this time? Did we were listening to certain type of music? Did we really fit this pocket to go with this type of producer?
How do I explain it to? Because like for
Explaining
me,
sound, dude,
for
is the
me,
bane
it's
of
a
my existence.
big
Yeah.
Make
challenge.
it bigger. It doesn't mosh
right.
hard enough. That doesn't really work with the
Make it
producer.
pop.
Yeah.
No, like, and I'm making mistakes all the time. I was telling Dom the other day, but like I'm working like I have a new song being released soon, and I was trying to find the middle between old school Chelsea Green EP and like newer production type thing, and to find the balance. I was explaining it so bad.
You just had a hard time just explaining it. Like,
yes, I was like. I was trying, and it wasn't. At the end, we ended up, working it well. But I was working with a super good death metal producer, and it was intended because he makes everything sound great. But I was making it. I was like not as polished, but like to him, he's just like, okay, more. So it was a big challenge. But I guess for you though, Jake, having worked with so many people and stuff like that, I'm guessing you have a big knowledge in terms of what to say and the terms technical.
A little bit. I always tell people because they're always like, why don't you record your own stuff and like release it yourself? And it's like, I open up my DAW, my interface to write. Like, I don't care about sitting and tweaking on like, ooh, this has too much gain, and ooh, let me turn the mid level. Like, cause then I'm not writing. Then I'm just sitting, turning knobs. So like, I realistically just kind of use like my tools to write the music. And then I have like more of a, I guess like a production mind where I have the ideas, but I can't necessarily execute them. Like, so I'll have like an idea for a record, I'll track it all out, and then I'll tell the producer that I work with, like, hey, make the vocals pan out this way, do this like filter effect here, and kind of just do more of a producer role once I track everything. That's kind of how I did like the Manitomb stuff and the latest Heaven Sender stuff, since I'm kind of like the main writer in both those projects. At least musically, like obviously the vocalists Joel and Spencer are both I let them do their thing on the song, so like that's their touch to the music.
I was about to ask that, like how's the process of writing for you, because you've been in different projects and different bands, and I feel like it's always different, right? So like how is it?
It's more modern. Yeah, it's more modern these days, because back in the day, like to write Her Demise stuff, I would go to the drummer's house. We would sit in the garage and
that's cool too, though.
Sweat for 6 hours, and maybe we'd get the
riff.
Like we'd get the first half of Take the Crown. We'd figure out the first half, and we come back the next day and try and hash out the rest of it, or like.
I hope you still remember it. And,
Yeah.
That's the beauty of tracking.
Because there was a lot
right?
of there's a lot of Call of Duty in between, takes and stuff like that. But nowadays it's more like I do things more solo, just kind of learning the more modern way people write, so like knowing that I have MIDI drums where I can, program a groove and write a guitar riff over it, and like more or less start just demoing out sounds and stuff, putting them on SoundCloud, sending them to the band and being like, hey, does this suck? Does this not suck? And getting their feedback on it, like, hey, add a two-step right here, or, stuff like that, and kind of bouncing back and forth with whatever, like either Joel or Spencer.
It's quick also. That's what I like personally. Like, it's because back then, maybe in your mind, it's like, oh, that riff's going to be, but you really don't know until, you put it together. But nowadays, it's like you can instantly almost know how it's going to be just with your guitar program. You program a little bit and you're like, okay, that's going to be
exactly.
That's
you kind of get somewhat close to final output just by writing it, with decent sounding stuff on your own DAW. So that's pretty much how I've been doing everything, is just kind of sitting here and writing out ideas, pick up my guitar, write a riff. If it doesn't suck, I may spend the next 5 hours messing with this thing. If it sucks, I'll probably put my guitar down and play World of Warcraft.
That's usually
the flow.
The funny part of that is, like, I would be curious to see what you consider like your standards of, like, I'm sure a lot of stuff you're like, that suck. We would hear it and be like, well, that that goes.
Which is
hard.
funny, because I'll show like Joel or Spencer like songs I threw away, and they're like, what are you doing? And I'm like, it's already in the garbage. It's committed. It's not getting pulled out. Well, I'll write something better, you know, just because like, you know, I'm trying to evolve like as a writer too. I had a pretty big break in not writing music, mainly because, you know, contractually I couldn't. So being able to actually, you know, I got to sit with a lot of ideas for like, you know, a good 5, 6, 7, 8 years of waiting for my contracts to expire. So now I get to execute them all. So now I just have like this big playbook of like, you know, I want to do a song like this, or I want to, you know, have an idea kind of chaotic like this and just execute.
Is it hard to go back on new stuff, maybe feeling like you could always just do something better now? Or do you end up using a lot of older ideas still?
Good question.
I really try not to use the older ideas unless I'm tapped out, like for newer stuff in my head right now, because I use that as like a back catalog. So I don't, I pretty much have something to stop writer's block, because I've had so many ideas build up and so many things I've noted down throughout the years. So where like if I hit writer's block,
at worst it kind of inspires you. Like you can go back to the bank and be like, oh, okay, this at least like sparked something that I can work off of.
Yeah, and counterbalancing these two projects, because you have to think like Heaven Sender is very much at its core, like, you know, more hardcore metalcore project, just very bouncy, and then Manitomb at its core is just, you know, just me writing deathcore stuff. People keep on calling it tech death and stuff, and I'm so confused because I don't. It's not a technical riff on those records.
It's fast, it's spazzy.
I can see it. I can see it though, because it's fairly.
It's, okay, so I think it's funny because back in the day, most deathcore wasn't necessarily super fast. Like a lot of it wasn't like high BPMs and stuff. Whereas now we're used to it, right? Like now you listen to like a band like Shadow of Intent or Infant Annihilator exists, and all these bands exist that go super fast. So like I think our definition of what's technical has just changed.
I think so
I remember
too,
even the music I was doing, like, you know, back then I remember us considering it like technical deathcore, but I listen to it now and I'm like, I mean, was it really tech? Like because I'm comparing to today's standards, right? But I think people still have like, you know, there's like an inkling of what technical used to be, you know.
I just listen to like the Faceless Alcademia, and then I listen to our stuff, and I'm like, we're not tech at all. I suck, actually. Anybody want to buy my guitar? You know.
But that was an extreme back then, right? Like there were like few bands like that, you know, bands like, I don't know, like Burning the Masses and stuff like that were like super like focused on being more technical and progressive for the most part as well. It was kind of always hand in hand with being progressive as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. It's fun. It's funny to compare what was tech now versus now, right? Especially since we had the whole tech death wave, right?
Exactly.
Like a few years ago.
Yeah, I never knew that I would enjoy that, because I was the person who's just like, put some hardcore riffs, big breakdowns, don't really care about the rest. I was that person, but like over the years, like stuff like Archspire and stuff like I get it. Like it's another kind of heavy when you go tech and fast. Like it hits differently.
Yeah, I've been trying to appreciate that a little bit more myself, because like for Manitomb, Joel, the vocalist, he's more of like a progressive fan himself, right? And I'm more of just like a kind of like you, Yan, like, you know, caveman mentality at times of just like, give me chugga, slam, you know, like, so like, I think Joel kind of counterbalances the project really well in that sense too, of like, I give him chugga, slam, and he does something more progressive and interesting over it. I still say like the Damage Over Time EP we just released like maybe a couple months ago is just super slept on, because that's, like I said, it's probably one of my best deathcore records I've released. And I think we did a great job with that one, kind of mixing the worlds and still pulling in like that old metalcore influence, because that's my biggest gripe with deathcore is like, where'd the core go?
Yeah.
You know, like a breakdown, a dissonant breakdown isn't necessarily core, you know? Like, so
no,
like,
because you've got some breakdowns in that metal kind of.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
So and things kind of lean more the death metal route, at least the stuff I hear today, where like the metal or like the deathcore I grew up on was always like a mixed bag of like metalcore, death metal. I mean, I feel like all of us from that era all heard At the Gate Slaughter the Soul at the same time as well. So that was a huge influence on a lot of us too, is like that At the Gates core sound. Like all those elements I consider part of deathcore because that's how I remember hearing it, you know?
Dude,
Same,
and
yeah.
it's kind of crazy because like that early wave, like you were talking about as Blood Runs Black earlier, and I think that's a perfect example of a band that was like
That's At the
super
Gates core.
melodic. Exactly. And it's super melodic. And a lot of the early deathcore bands were melodic in that way, but that went away quick. Like real quick. Because like when we had like Job for a Cowboy, Whitechapel, Suicide Silence kind of blow up, those bands weren't like that. And that's what kind of took over, right? Like
And they were more
melodic
leaning on the
aspects-
death. Yeah.
Yeah.
They were leaning on the death side of
There
things.
was two
and like
routes.
brutal death even, and like just these other elements that weren't necessarily. I mean, Whitechapel had like melodic parts, but it wasn't like they weren't doing At the Gates riffs, which a lot of the A Different Breed of Killer and Kalira and all these older kind of like that early wave. A lot of it was more leaning towards that, like the melody, which went away super quick. And I wish it had stuck around longer because like we don't hear any deathcore bands now doing that sort of stuff. Like now there's some deathcore bands doing stuff that's melodic, but it's not the same thing. It's not the same kind of like the symphonic stuff like could have
not
melodic like riffs, but it's not the same thing. It's not At the Gates, you know.
And that's what I try and do with Manitomb. I don't try and do it to the extreme of like, making it sound like an As Blood Runs Black part or anything, but I try to add those melodic elements and those metalcore, pretty much those scales and progressions metalcore used into the songs here and there,
Yeah, because you look at, I was talking earlier about Count Your Blessing being exactly in the middle of metalcore and deathcore type thing. It's death, but it's metalcore sounding at the same time. And I feel like most bands, it was either you go death or you go metalcore, but like I would say cleaner metalcore. Like you add more clean vocals and like another kind of metalcore. So we this metal kind of heavy deathcore metalcore thing was there for what, like a few years?
You have to
even
think
heavy
too,
metalcore. Yeah.
You have to think as bands progress, like your management, a lot of people have kind of a say over your overall sound and where things are directed. If you want to play like stadiums, big venues, big concerts, you kind of have to adhere to that Sirius XM core sound a little bit. So you kind of see as these bands get bigger, they kind of drive towards that too, which kind of blurs the lines of where the genre is or what the band is,
Yeah, exactly. And that's the reason why when you hear those old school influence coming back, it's mostly either independent projects or people who do what they want.
It's the younger guys, like, like the Tracheotomies. Like, I love that band, by the way.
Oh,
like,
my God.
So good, yeah.
Fallen God. So much stuff from Florida. I can go on. I'm sure you guys can, too, go on for days about, like...
We keep talking about it.
Well, Florida scene is what the scene we had back in, like, the 2006s in the Inland Empire, where we had, like... I mean, every band in deathcore, like, every... kind of came from our area. Like, we had our Suicide Silence and Pending Doom. We had a lot of the top bands out here. And now I'm kind of seeing, like, we don't have that out here right now, but they have that out there right now.
Yeah.
Like, like in Florida, they're kind of the champions for the scene right now.
It's the step ahead, I think, right? Because we're starting to see with the revival bands outside of Florida doing the thing.
Like
Texas has a decent
Girl of
scene.
Glass from Texas.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
We've got a few bands in Texas, a few in Cali as well, but it's kind of all in the South, but still like the few and far between compared to what they're doing in and how long they've been doing it in Florida. And they've been doing the same thing with the older,
crowds,
like
too.
the revival of metalcore and stuff like that too. Like there's like multiple things that they're kind of first on. Screamo music is fucking popping off too. Like all the different genres from that kind of era are popping up in Florida right now, but everyone's catching up. Like it's starting to crop up everywhere else, but they were there first. And the same thing that happened in Cali. Like they were there first, and then it kind of spread everywhere.
It's all
else
who
afterwards.
has the live scene, kind of like what Jan was about to say. Like it's all in that. It's all in the live scene because like if you can get 300 kids out to a show, realistically, it doesn't matter if they're all death metal bands, they're all deathcore bands. Like, you can throw an emo band on next to a power violence band, next to the most blackened band, and the kids are all there, and somebody's going to appreciate that music. It may not be the whole audience, but like, you know, somebody in that group is going to be like, oh, this band was really cool, I need to check them out. And that's what Florida has right now, is they have the actual local scene, you know, like
kids going there and stuff like that. Because the thing is, as much as
packed on a
people,
Tuesday night, it's fucking wild.
Yeah.
yeah, as much as like old metalheads wants to pretend that you know, when you do music that resonate with younger people or girls or whatever, it's like, oh my god. But like when you one day you gotta realize that a scene without kid is dead, basically.
Yeah. I mean, I went to Chain Reaction, which is like our Orange County venue out here, like a really popular venue, for a band. I won't name them, but like pretty big band. Like I was really stoked to see them. There was maybe 15 kids there for them. Mm-hmm. I got to stand in every spot of the speaker to hear.
That's cool for you, though.
Yeah, yeah, it was awesome.
I've played to 15 kids at Chain Reaction. I'll just say that much.
I mean, I played to 15 kids, but not a Chain. Like that was because I'm from out here. But definitely have played to less than 15 too. So.
Dude, the podcast is a good example.
I played with
that.
the Cali band at Chain Reaction. You know that you know, and you've been friends with. That had 15 people at.
Yeah,
so.
but it kind of it's not necessarily
it.
the bands either. It's like, you know, I kind of always give it up to like, you know, the local scene in general. Like if it's hyped, it's moving like to where like we had this venue called the Nitty Gritty back in the day. It was a church, right? That's where Her Demise kind of got to play and kind of grow.
The amount of comments talking about that, by the way, you predicted it, but like I was looking at the comments, that's everybody was talking about it.
There was a point where kids who didn't even listen to music were like, "What are you doing tonight?" "Oh, going to the Nitty Gritty." It was like it wasn't even like people were like, "I'm going to the Nitty Gritty" and saying a list of bands. It was like, I'm just going to the Nitty Gritty to kick it. So. 500, 600 kids at a church every weekend, you know, like
that's awesome.
That really helped our music scene out here. And like around that time, like I was still in Carnifex, so I was able to like get them. I'd be like, hey, can Carnifex and Amir come through and play? Hey, my buddies in Recon are in California right now. Can they hop on a show? I won't be there, but can they still hop on a show and play a show there? I got to do a lot of that and get a lot of cool bands in there to where it was like to help grow the scene as much as possible.
Yeah, and you knew there'd be people there regardless, so it wasn't like a risk to anyone to have an extra band on the bill.
The first time I booked Recon, I was 16 years old, and I booked him at a venue, and I think the only people were there were me and the guys from Winds of Plague hanging out. Like that was literally it. So it was cool to get a second chance with an actual audience to push him in front of, because like we didn't have that scene even when I started listening to this music. It was, you know, I was booking shows, you know, to get things rolling. That's how I met Carnifex, is booking shows. My band, I had a band called Hunt Them Down, like a local high school band. We used to play around, and we ended up playing with Carnifex in like this city called Marietta, I think it was, or Temecula was one of those two, and ended up playing with them. They watched us, we watched them, and like, why do we sound so similar? You know, like it was one of those things where like it's like, wait a minute, like those guys kind of do it like us, and we were looking at them being like, oh, those guys kind of do it like us. So ended up linking with Scott through booking shows and booking Carnifex a lot, trying to help them out, because I already had a band at the time.
That's the most organic way to join something, in my opinion. You know what I mean? Like you were just
They ended up playing a show for me at this. I used to book at this bar. I used to call the shows, which you guys will appreciate this. I used to call the shows Baldy Brutality, you know, because it was at a bar, so it was like brutality, you know.
Sure.
But I used to do these shows called Baldy Brutality at this bar, and I booked Carnifex. I booked a bunch of awesome bands that night. Wage War, tons of like bands nobody had heard of yet, all in, you know, all at this small little bar. And Carnifex came as usual. They played, and I can tell they were stressing because they were like one guitar player down, you know, and pretty much was like, hey, I'll do it. And that was pretty much it.
Dude, and you must have been we probably talked about that back then, but like you were probably stressed, right? Like even if you were stoked and stuff like that, like I don't know at what stage Carnifex, I don't know if they were already picking up some traction or not that much.
Not necessarily, no. Okay. They were just a local band. Like
because it was before Dead in My Heart. Yeah, so it's not. Yeah, you're right. Okay.
I don't like when I find bands. I don't really care, or even artists in general, like SoundCloud, everything. I don't really care what level you're at, but when I hear your music, if it like speaks to me or like I get, that punch in the gut of like, oh, this is really cool, I just go with my gut. Like, and the Carnifex was always one of those bands where like I can tell they worked really hard. They were very dedicated to their craft.
True.
And just cool people in general, So like it was one of those things where it was like it made sense. They were cool, and I was really young too, so I was like literally just graduating high school. Like, I think I was
That's
still
crazy.
17 when I joined that band.
That's
so,
wow.
So they put up with babysitting a young 17-year-old kid in their band for many of tours.
But
so.
it's like it's a different perception for you, because I remember asking those questions when we did the kind of conversation interview / 12 hours of becoming friends. We were talking. I was often asking like, "Hey, Jake, how was it to meet that person?" But you were not from an outside perspective. You were in the scene. So for you, meeting people, like, I guess it wasn't like a kid meeting like his idol. It was just somebody in the scene chilling with people and stuff like that. So I feel like you never had this starstruck type of, oh my God, that it's that person type thing.
I mean, I've just always been myself, and like, just happy to be around good art. So like I think people see that and they appreciate that when they meet me too. Is like I'm not a clout chaser. I'm not trying to get anything off of anybody realistically. Like, if anything, I'm just trying to make art, and if you appreciate my art and I appreciate your art, why not, hang out? That's kind of how the T-Mills thing kind of came about too. Is like we
can talk about that. That's interesting.
we both fucked with what each other were doing. So, and I can tell you a funny story about T-Mills too, right? So we were, when I probably early phases of Carnifex, is probably like, the first 6 months of being in the band, or maybe 8 months, we played a backyard show. We were still playing backyard shows back then, by the way.
Awesome.
And I remember walking out of the backyard show, and this kid walks up to me, and he was like, yo, you're in Carnifex, Moshua, right? Which Josh, the owner of The City Is Burning, used to be called Moshua. That was like his name, And I was like, yeah, of course, man. And he was like, bro, here's my demo. Can you check this demo out? Like, and it was Travis. And he was in a grindcore band, and he was doing pig squeals. I
would be so curious to hear that.
I figured Yan would appreciate that if I could remember the band name. I'll ask someone around here. Someone probably remembers it. But it's Travis doing pig squeals and, like death metal vocals and stuff like that. But that was the first time I met him, was in Carnifex. And it was just that brief moment. And then when I left Carnifex, started doing Her Demise, and Her Demise started getting like a little bit of a, like a little ramp up in popularity. He messaged me again, and I was like, oh shit, weren't you that dude? Like, and he was like, yeah, dude, I'm doing rap now and stuff. And I was like, oh, this stuff's way cooler,
Like he knew you were the guy that he talked to in Carnifex.
Yeah. And Travis, he ended up signed to The City Is Burning as well. So we ended up being label mates, and we were like, at the time, at least, we were like the biggest things on the label. So it only made sense that we hung out with each other, and kind of started networking together and stuff like that, like going and hanging out at the same parties.
Made sense.
Right. But he was like hanging out at the studio just because, like, he was just hanging
exactly.
out. Yeah.
No, we would just have him hanging out, like, or I'd be at his studio just hanging out. The weirdest things happen when hanging out with him. Like, we had a house party at our house one time, and he played, and then I don't know if you know who Gata is. He's in like Little Dickie's TV show. It's Gata, Gata. He used to be a rapper back in the day, but he's like huge actor now. But he performed at my house. Like, hanging out with him just got us into so many different, like, we were a deathcore band turned kind of more metalcore. Like, we had no right to hang out with Soulja Boy, but it happened, like.
Yeah, but T-Mill, like, just for people in the chat in context, like T-Mill was huge after a while. Like, he became like we're talking, I could be wrong, but we're talking millions of views and shit. Like, he was big for a while,
I mean, how was it for you, kind of seeing T-Mills from maybe being like close to him, and to see his rise?
Yeah.
I mean, I was super
Were
proud
you guys
of the
like
dude.
living it, like seeing him become like larger than life, or was it?
It was, you know, like from an outside perspective, everything always seems like it kind of just happens out of nowhere, you know, like that's how you get those like industry plant type, you know, everybody saying that.
Yeah.
But if you weren't there for it, you didn't see how hard someone worked. Like I saw Travis work extremely hard. Like I give it to everybody from like Travis Carnifex. I saw these people work extremely hard back in the day, and that's why they are where they're at. It's
And
simple
still,
as that.
if we're honest.
Yeah, but effort aside, I mean, most things do take effort, but it's someone like T-Mills still had like a pretty rapid rise, right? From not really being known to becoming really fucking big in the scene.
You got to think where we were at on the internet at the time too. Like how many, he was like the first SoundCloud rapper, like a good 8 years before SoundCloud rap even came to be, you know, like
we weren't calling it SoundCloud rap back then.
No, we weren't. Yeah. But but like he was essentially the first of that wave. Like and realistically, we wouldn't have artists like Little Peep without people like T-Mills, you know? Like you kind of have to follow that progression. And even if you know any history behind that, like Lil Peep pioneered with Travis as well. So
yeah, he was the scene, like he was a cool, he kind of had, it was the perfect timing too, right? Like stretchy ears, look good, tattoos and stuff, like the scene kid, but like rapping girls and stuff. So it was kind of, and we were in the phase where you would see things like Broken Side, whatever. It was the perfect timing of just like,
well, it was bridging different audiences, right? Because it wouldn't have typically been something that, like, for lack of a better way to explain it, that like white kids would have fucked with. You know, like it was like the whole rap game was, you know, he was kind of bridging two worlds together with what he was doing, which I think again, it kind of goes back to like a lot of people that were seen back then would just kind of listen to whatever was popping, right? There was like less judgment, right? But it was cool to have those things that kind of tied different scenes together. Like he was a big part of that for sure.
He helped bridge the gap for Her Demise and getting a non 99% male audience too, you know, like, cause before Travis, you know, like our shows were predominantly male, you know, like it was pretty, the crowds were pretty much, you kind of knew what you were expecting. People would be throwing chairs and stuff. Where when we started, you know, getting into like working with Travis, putting out songs with him and stuff, our audience was more split. It was less throwing chairs and more getting off stage and taking pictures with, you know, people afterwards and stuff. So like, I always give it to him because he helped us out a ton, especially with the takeover, helping us finish that.
Image of Her Demise My Rise kind of changed as well, because I remember I had two encounter with the band. I had my friend who showed me Straight in Your Throat, and he's like, oh my, he presented to me as a deathcore band, and he's like, oh my god, and we would listen to that for a while, right? And then you came in, you started writing other things, and then I saw you guys as not. Like, I saw you guys as just, like, party dudes goofing around, having fun, like, friends doing some heavy music type thing.
Every project I did before Her Demise had a rigid archetype to it, you know? Like, we are X, Y, and Z. You will not stray from this path of X, Y, and Z. When we write music, we write X, Y, and Z. This is how the music sounds. This is how it's going to go. But that's not how I write music. I write music purely off of feeling. So if you box me into X, Y, and Z, oh man, I hit writer's block every 5 minutes because it's like my brain's trying to check all these boxes instead of just having fun doing it. Where, like, especially with Her Demise, like if I wanted to go and write a song like Southern Comfort and literally just get on my guitar and like do this twangy Southern riff, no one's stopping me. No one's like, ooh, that didn't check all the boxes. Ooh, that's not really the vibe we're going for. And that's kind of why the takeover sounds like a mess. That's kind of what I'm explaining.
But it was interesting, though.
But that's what makes the band, right? Like, I think that's what makes it interesting. I think, and you know, and that's like to each their own, right? Like, so, but I think a lot of people did gravitate towards that. And then you even look at the image of the band, you know, is the mostly white splashes of colors, the diamond,
that
like
was
the
all
gold
my
chains,
idea
all
too,
that, like all that stuff, like was so not like a deathcore band, right?
Yeah, we wanted to
so
change
different.
it up because at the end of the day too, like, I mean, if you really think about it, Her Demise, we're kind of a pretty band, you know? Like we weren't trying to, throw a bunch of black metal logos up and like, darken pics. We wanted to show like we want to show ourselves off a little bit,
Yeah, gotta show off the chest with the V-necks,
It was a very competitive environment at the time, There was a lot of
and it was relevant.
What was it? Boy bands of breakdowns is what we called it back in the day.
Yeah. But it was, I feel like it was relevant though, because when you dropped that album, I mean, you had Austin, right? Who was like, we're talking about people like Austin, he was huge too. Like people were looking, I mean, we're talking Off Mice and Men, Attack before that and stuff like that. So having him on the album, T-Mills, as we talk, was like, so the album was extremely just well timed with people that,
and those weren't
relevant.
Like paid features or anything either. Like what people don't like when people hear features these days, I know they assume half the time it's a paid feature, but we were just hanging out. Like we were staying at the label's house while we were recording our record. Austin was there hanging out, so we made friends with him. Travis was always there hanging out and doing stuff, so we made friends with him. Like it was just like friends helping each other out, like there was no
you told me the story of
like that.
Of T-Mills. It was kind of almost improvised on the spot, right? Like not to put you on the spot, but
everything was.
So
he came in clutch for us on that record because I always say, like our singer was enjoying success is the best way I can put it. So he kind of wasn't ready when we went to the studio and went to go lay down all the vocals, which I did. Remember, I experiment a lot, so I threw a bunch of hooks and chorus style things in there that he was not ready for, and I'm always and that's when I hear what my vocalist can do, I try and challenge him on the next record, like I try and
a good thing though.
Throw more curveballs at him or go like, ooh, I think they'd sound cool over something like this. But I don't think he was ready for it at the time. So just thank God for Travis and, being ready and being one of those people, who can just hop in front of a mic and freestyle a hook like nothing,
Yeah, that's special.
Realistically though, like what would have happened what do you think would have happened if he wasn't there during those recording sessions?
Would have done it?
I honestly don't know. It's one of those things where if that didn't work out the way it did, I don't know if I'd even be talking to you guys today.
Would have been delayed, maybe. Like
we were already delayed.
So yeah,
that was our second time recording that record too, by the way. So we were already double over budget. So yeah, that record cleaned us out like no other. So like, yeah, we had no more funds, we had no more budget, we had no more way to buy time at that point. So it was more just like thank God we had friends in the studio who were talented and could help us out.
Do you remember if you had a lot of, not to go like negative, but do you remember if you had a lot of people kind of complaining because of the new direction of the band type thing?
Yeah. You have to think we built up a pretty strong local scene for ourselves, and we had to, with that sound direction, we kind of had to realize like we are going to have to kind of abandon our local scene a little bit. It wasn't on like intentionally, but it was more like in order for us to be heard by more people, we have to be a little bit more approachable. So we did that. We got more ears to where we can actually tour. But when we came, California became a little bit more sparse is kind of what I'm saying. Like less and less people were showing up to the shows.
The famous word sellout was probably
which is valid when you compare the music from Summer Sessions EP that we did with Coco, which was just blast beats and brutal breakdowns, to what we did on the Takeover. But you have to grow as an artist too. Yeah, what people don't understand is that may have been Her Demise's first major record, but I already did that. So like, it was like, do I want to redo what I already did, and put out another brutal record and go this direction? Or do I want to try something else? My record label was tied in with like Warped Tour and Breathe Carolina and a lot of this other scene that I didn't think we were that different from, So like, I wanted to make sure that, like we can be part of that too. So we can have opportunities like playing Warped Tour and, maybe playing some shows at Breathe Carolina and stuff like that.
I think also like the word sellout would, people use it loosely, but that implies that you'd be doing something against your will purely for right. Which
And
I don't
that you
think
made
from
money, which I didn't. So
yeah, sure, but people can try to sell out. I guess would still be like a thing if you're not making the money and still be categorized that. But from what I'm hearing, this is just the music you wanted to write anyways, right?
we were
Like, it
just
wasn't-
experimenting. Yeah, I mean, I was young and still trying to understand how to, like. We got lucky a lot as young kids, with the music we were writing, like you just throw a bunch of riffs together and then all of a sudden it has 100,000 plays on MySpace and you're like, wait, I'm him? Like it was kind of like that back then.
Being
So,
in the scene, you guys were too, right? Like
Yeah,
you guys would
yeah.
have been somewhere else. Maybe it would have been different too, like
Oh,
even
100%.
outside of MySpace,
Yeah. So yeah, just luck, like it was a lot of luck back then. And
Right
now,
place, right time.
and just like I said, pure experimentation of being young, like I didn't want to be boxed in. I wanted to be able to try and branch out as an artist because as you've kind of seen with like Manitomb and stuff, if I want a rapper on my record, I'm gonna put a rapper on a death metal record. There's no rules here, like.
Yeah, and sometimes you complain, but you end up liking the direction over time. Like I fully remember me and my friend, Count Your Blessing is still, I still listen to that, to be honest. I still like it, but we would listen to it. And then I remember both being upset with Suicide Season because it was different. And I was like, what is that? But next thing you know, you were listening to it almost every day, and before you know it, we liked it, and I looked at him and I'm like, well, I mean, we still listen to it, so it's always kind of at first people are upset, but over time you realize like Suicide Season, as much as Count Your Blessing was a big thing for Bring Me, Suicide Season was probably twice as big. Let's be
but I think
be real.
but that goes to what Jake was saying about hitting another audience too, right?
Yeah.
Like you're kind of leaving you're knowingly, going to alienate some of your fan base with the hope of getting a bigger fan base somewhere else as well, right? Like it's kind of just playing that game.
It's a
I
risk.
think a lot, yeah, it's a risk, but a lot of bands do it. It's hard to come out winning on the other side of that, but you just got to take risks sometimes. And if that's what you're feeling, like selling out would have been doing another deathcore record.
Yeah, I think.
Where I was kind of going with earlier, right? It's like
second straight in your throat, songs very similar.
Think about this too. As your band gets bigger, you're playing to bigger audiences, right? The biggest complaint that like in metal is like, I guess like the Metallica Black Album kind of thing, right? Like where people like they sold out when they wrote the Black Album. Did they sell out, or did they just realize they're playing arenas and playing thrash metal in arenas sounds like noise? And the audience cannot decipher fast notes and all this stuff. So stepping it down to dun, cut, that type of vibe, the people all the way in the back can hear that groove and still vibe to your music. And that's kind of like, if you see bands in deathcore that have grown like exponentially big, Whitechapel's a good example of that. What did they have to do on their last records in order to, get to that bigger venue? Is they had to write music that kind of fit the bigger venue more, You have to adapt a lot, and people don't understand that. And also, it's funny because they say they're Millhead and that's their whole life, and then they wish to their bands absolutely no success and crowds of 6 people. So I'm just like, you say you live that life, but usually if you're a fan of something, you want them to do good.
You want to support. You want them to be twice as big. Like when I'm wishing to any project that I like is to just explode and be super huge. That's what I'm wishing. But it's funny in metal, they're like, no, they were better when the recordings were bad and nobody was listening to it. Okay,
I feel like that's gotten better these days. Though,
it is though, yeah.
Because like, let's just say back in the MySpace days, if a band were to take a sponsorship, just fund a tour, just to fund a tour, any corporate sponsorship, even if it was just like a fucking energy drink. Mm-hmm. That was pretty much it for your band, like sellouts,
now people are begging for metal. The Taco Bell year-round coupons.
Now when the bands come through, it's got like 5 sponsors on the side of their van alone, and I was like, if we could have did that, we could have ate actual food on tour instead of just 7-Eleven, guys. But
what was the
they've gotten better.
The most awesome thing was the clothing lines or back then, Drop Dead,
Rocket
Rocket,
and
and
all
all
that
that.
stuff.
Oh, I
It
love
was
that stuff.
so
Yeah.
sick to see. Like that's something that, and I can, not to make it about me. That's one of my goal with my brand is to start sponsoring projects and bands and stuff like that. So, but it was so cool back then because you would see. I don't know. Like I remember Ship Shape with
Yeah.
It was the only acceptable sponsor, if we're being real.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Yeah,
And
nobody was complaining.
That
And
or like
close.
ladies
Yeah.
of metal, like that. Those were kind of, or like maybe Suicide Girls on the off. It's like one of those like.
And arguably too,
Yeah, exactly.
being a billboard for some other person's thing to make money doesn't necessarily help you, like, cause I mean, I wore the City is Burning umbrella clothing every single day, like to represent but that we weren't getting paid as usually a clothing sponsorships. Like,
That's
here's
what I was
5
gonna
shirts.
say. They were shipping a box.
Yeah.
And that's it. Yeah.
Here's 5 shirts, make them last,
It's more. I feel like it's more for the not credibility, but it's just like you've got sponsors and stuff like. It's more for the taking seriously, I guess, on MySpace. Like when you would see all those, you would see like ESP and then Drop Dead and this and this. It's kind for someone who comes across the page at first, it appears like a bigger band. It's just like, oh, okay, they're like Red Bull.
Even back in the day though, always found it funny. A band picture with all 5 or 6 dudes wearing the
It's too
same
much. The
brand.
It's too much. No, but it's too much.
I look back on those photos
You're
now. I'm like,
ruining it.
how did anyone accept this? Like, how was this okay?
It's ruining it though. Like if there was no impact to it. It's like if the whole. Did you ever notice that if the whole band or have this, even if they're full of tattoos, if they look too similar, you lose the impact of having like a frontman full of it. Loses the whole, and because they're all this it's cool, but it's just like, if you think about the bands, the first thing that comes to mind is often like the whole image. Like, look, we talk about that a lot, but like Frankie from Immure, he has his own thing, Mitch has his thing, Scott has it, like everybody has their own thing. Like Oceano, right? Like Adam is super charismatic and cool, and back in the day super intimidating, I would say, also like very so Ricky Hoover. Like if you look at people that kind of stand out, T Mills, whatever, like it's like there's a little something that makes you stand out. People remember, oh, it's this dude, oh, it's that person, in your brain. Like it's not conscious, but you kind of need the factor like that, I guess. I don't know if it's like that today though, but it was.
I mean, it is. Think of Little Peep. Think of artists.
Yeah, it's still like that. Yeah, it's always going to
100%
be
is still like that.
even actors, right? People in cinema. You need
Dude, look at the kind of icons and deathcore vocalists. Not all of them, obviously, but a lot
Alex,
of them are like
Will,
the jacked up fucking dudes, fully tatted up. It's kind of a thing.
Yeah, and Will too. Like I know people are like, oh, I don't know what he's here, but he's got style. He looks awesome. He's got the drift thing. Like it makes sense, right? Like if you think about like actors, like unfortunately, if they would look terrible, it wouldn't, like people won't look up to that. It's part of it, the aesthetic is important. So it's just part of the game.
You played with Dusty for a bit, right? Dusty Balls?
Yeah,
he was like near the end of Her Demise, right?
He was in the last wave before we kind of said goodbye, which was I met him on Warped Tour somewhere in Cincinnati or something like that. I was walking around the buses. I don't remember what I was doing. Like I was literally, I think I was just trying to find the bus that I was on or something. But he said, I remember someone just being like, "Hey, you're Jake." And I turned around and it was Dusty. And he wasn't in Rose Funeral when we toured with Rona Funeral and Carnifex, so I didn't know him from like that time. But I was like, "Yo, what's up?" He's like, "Oh, you're in Demise. You guys are really cool. I really like what you guys are doing and stuff like that." And I was like, "Oh, no way. Our drummer just quit halfway through Warped Tour, and we're kind of just hanging out now, And he was like, "Oh, really? I'll play drums for you guys." And I was like, "We have a tour with Volumes. As soon as I get off of this tour, we have a tour with Volumes in a couple months. When I get home, if you're there, if you can fly out when I get home, let's just hit the ground running, start practicing and getting ready for this Volumes tour." So that's what we did. He flew out to California kind of.
Right, because he spent time with you guys despite the volumes thing. Because you guys
he
had a
lived
photo
with
shoot with them
he
and
lived with me.
everything.
Yeah, he lived with me. So
Sick
pretty
drummer,
much like
by the
for
way.
3 months lived with me. We practiced, we got ready for that tour, and then that's where Her Demise kind of imploded.
No, I just bringing him up because, well, especially back then, he had such a look, right, with the long hair.
Oh, yeah.
Definitely
he,
did.
He was a very like recognizable dude, but
Yeah.
Very
also
talented too.
yeah, and he's been a part of so many great projects over the years. But it's crazy to see what he's doing now. Like, dude,
What is he doing now? I'm just
Dude,
curious.
I haven't talked to him.
he produces, but he plays guitar as well as drums, but he plays guitar live now with like, what's the name? There's this like songwriter dude. Wait, I had it. Oh, I had it written here, but it's not there anymore. Yeah, he does like he plays like massive fucking shows and does like not arena type stuff, but like really like he's what you would consider playing sellout music, you know.
I mean,
but he's become an amazing producer and he's fucking sick at guitar. Like he's just like very multi-talented.
artist
Yeah,
type.
he's just you can tell he's an artist, right? More than
that
just
that was
drummer.
always his goal, though, is to be really big and famous. So like props if he was able to get there, you know. 'Cause,
It's always cool to see. I have a question for you, Jay. I know you always were yourself and stuff like that, but if you would name, like, in terms of guitar players, like if we're talking about influences, like people who inspired you,
Yeah, that's
maybe.
easy.
I
I learned how to play guitar through being a kid and having Pantera tapes. Dimebag Darrell is my favorite guitar player of all time. Like I learned most of what I know off of literally having a Pantera tape, pressing play, hearing a note, finding the note, pause, play, until I figured out the whole run, you know? Like I learned a lot of stuff that way. Pantera, huge guitar influence on me. Limp Bizkit, Wes Borland, huge influence on me just because it's interesting, you know? Like it is so not what most people would do on parts, you know, like the way Wes riffs and stuff like that. And I love that. Yeah, those are probably my biggest two, like, you know, like especially metal driven guitar players.
Did you grow up around music, like parents or anything like that, or?
I mean, I grew up Southern California. I feel like we're all inherently grow up with music because,
Right.
like, you know, the Offsprings from Orange County, No Doubts from Orange County,
Sure,
like a lot of big bands, and the radio is like, at least when I was growing up, was extremely popular out here. So like rock radio was like, we had like 7 rock radio stations, you know, like, and like some of them would play extreme stuff at night, but like for the most part, like, you know, I grew up appreciating bands like kind of like a lot of rock bands on the radio, like a lot of the grunge era stuff was cool. I liked I'm drawing a blank on their name right now, but they're an awesome rock band. It'll come to me eventually, but like a lot of, you know, just a lot of radio rock from back in the day.
Yeah.
A lot of like uncles and like, you know, older people would have, you remember like the big CD booklets people used to have back in the day? They would have like
Yeah.
hundreds of CDs in them. So like I used to go through all the adult CDs back in the day and be like, what is Hatebreed? I'll take that. Pantera, I'll take that.
Okay.
You know, like, and kind of just go off of visuals too. Like, oh, that's a cool CD. Oh, like, you know, like, oh, that's Iron Maiden. That's a cool CD. Like, and I just pop it in and listen to it and be like, oh, okay. So this is what Iron Maiden sounds like, you know? So like, I kind of just was always discovering music, and really no limit to what I thought. Like I said, I don't like having rules around things like music and stuff like that. So, you know, I hear Limp Bizkit and hear them do, you know, a collaboration with Wu-Tang, you know, Method Man, Redman. I'm like, this is probably the coolest thing I've ever heard in my life. Like, I just heard super heavy riffs and now they're just doing a beat with Fred and, you know, Method Man rapping over it. What? Like, so like things like that I appreciated back in the day.
Okay.
Well, it sounds like you were curious towards music though, like in the sense that if you're like you're like willingly like curious about like these random CDs that you don't even know what they're gonna sound like. You're like, oh, this looks cool. Okay, like it seemed like you were invested in like trying to find new music and stuff like that.
I mean, anybody who remembers me from high school too remembers I was like, you know, before there was emo kids and stuff, I was the kid walking around with the hair in front of his face, wearing like a shirt of a band nobody's ever heard, and being like, you know, like, nobody gets me. Nobody gets this music, you know, like
obscure.
Yeah. So I always appreciated even diving into, like, I do it to this day. Diving into catalogs, people don't appreciate it. Like, I don't think a lot of people know this, but like, I helped out the SoundCloud wave a ton at the beginning. Like the SoundCloud rap.
I wanted to talk about that because it's funny. You just talked about Limp Bizkit, and you know, fucking Xavier's
is
going
on tour with
Limp
Bizkit right now.
Yeah, it's just crazy to see. It's so cool.
Yeah.
But talk to us a bit about that, like the underground, like kind of rap scene from back in the day.
Yeah,
maybe some of your involvement there. I'd love to hear you talk about that.
Yeah, like, so pretty much around 2010, 11 is when Her Demise kind of broke up, right? So around that time, I was really just trying to find something. The goal is like, I knew I couldn't just start another band. It was like my band fell apart for a reason. So like, I knew I just couldn't just start another band, and contractually, technically wasn't able to do that either. So like, I was like, well, I'm going to college now because you know, like, I'm gonna go to college and learn some things because I'm, you know, all I know is from 17 to like 22, 23 was touring. Like, I didn't really know anything other than that. So I was like, let's go to school, learn some skills that people respect, because, you know, walking around saying you're a guitar player, they're like, cool. So went to school for that and was like trying to find a way to be creative. Like, I still wanted to do something with music, but didn't really know in what capacity, you know, like, because knew I couldn't go to school and like spool up a whole new band, because then, you know, if the band does well, what am I doing? Quitting school. You know, so like trying to find a way to still be involved with music while doing, like, being responsible. So like I said, I'm an internet kid. I always go around the internet exploring things, clicking on random links of music, giving things a chance that have 10 plays on them. And I was just kind of exploring music at the time, like, and seeing that SoundCloud was like one of those things that no one was really talking about, right? Like, but I was always on SoundCloud. Like, you can even look back to the history. Her Demise was on SoundCloud like the day SoundCloud released, because I always thought that was a cool idea. I was like, oh, cool, this is going to be something big. It just didn't end up for metal, it ended up for a different genre. But I remember being on YouTube, and I watched this video randomly. It was from an artist named Young Simi. People may not know who that artist is, but he's a Florida artist. And being like, oh, wow, this dude's doing some real cool stuff. And then kind of digging into his catalog and seeing he was part of a group that was kind of up and coming called Raider Clan. And then being like, oh, no way. Space Ghost Perp is the guy who runs Raider Clan. I remember hearing him on this A$AP Rocky mixtape I used to listen to, you know? I think it was Live Love A$AP, or maybe that was a new one. Live Love A$AP was the first one. He was on that record with A$AP. So I remember seeing him from there and kind of just starting to dig into this Raider Clan catalog of being like, okay, well, who's on this little group in Florida? What's going on here? Realizing it wasn't a group from Florida. It was an internet group. Xavier Wolf and Chris Travis were from Memphis. And realistically, one of their artists, funny enough, was from the same city as me. So through all that digging, found an artist named Eddie Baker. Eddie Baker went to the same schools as me. He's like the generation under me, right? Like, so like some of my friends were his.
You didn't cross paths, but like
we had similar friends and stuff,
right,
which was
exactly.
like we had friends that like we were friends with but didn't know each other yet and stuff like that. So like, I remember just messaging him and being like, yo, dude, what you're doing is really cool. I'm from the area too. Let's hang out. And just ended up hanging out with him. And more or less was just hanging out with like an artist I thought was cool, you know, because that's what I was used to doing. I was like, cool, I'm in college. I can kind of like, I don't get to be like, you know, hang out with all the rock stars and do all the cool stuff, but, you know, I can still hang out with some artists and stuff and they respect me. So like, just through hanging out with him, I saw that he had like, I learned that these guys are really talented, but they didn't have what we had, like from the MySpace, era. We knew how the internet worked already, right? They weren't. They didn't necessarily know how the internet worked, like per se. Like they didn't know, like, oh, if you build a YouTube, you can get a following off there and stuff like that. So as they were like, as I was hearing the music, I was like, hey, I'll shoot some videos for you guys. Like I'm in college, I got a camera, I can figure this out, and shot a video for Eddie Baker. That video got really popular in like the underground scene because, there wasn't a lot of underground rappers dropping videos and stuff like that at the time either. I'm technically the second, maybe the third guy to do this. The first guy worked with Juicy J, who was doing like underground videos. The second guy's name was Forbes, FXRBES. He was from Florida. He was like, me and Forbes talked to each other. He was like the East Coast, I was the West Coast videographer guy. We were the only ones doing it. But pretty much once I did that video for Baker, everybody saw it and was like, this is really cool. By the way, if you ever watch it, it's called Eddie Baker Plugs. I literally just got inspired by Pantera I'm Broken, the music video, with the hanging light swinging, and kind of was like, I'm gonna do something cool like this, but for a rapper,
Yeah.
So I did that video, and obviously, since he was friends with Xavier, Chris Travis, he was in that group. All of them ended up flying out to California, hanging out. And then I got in good with like Xavier Wolf and Chris Travis. Eventually met Tyler, the Creator, and all of Odd Future. Ended up hanging out with a lot of the Odd Future guys, and kind of just filming, like kind of just documenting the time through my lens, like through videos. And just kind
was
of
that something you were looking to pursue, I guess, like
No.
the whole video thing, or it was just kind of like, hey, I'm here, I guess I have a camera, let's do something with this?
I just wanted to make art because if you look at it, Cole Bennett came after me and actually worked with a lot of the artists I worked with originally, and you can even tell by his original style where some of his style came from was like my underground videos, and the guy who I always forget his name, but the guy who used to do the Juicy J videos. But if I wanted that, I probably could have had that. But that wasn't the goal. Because to do that, you have to do something that I'm never willing to do. That's make art for artists you don't like their music. So like, if you want to be big in any, like in those behind the scenes things, you have to kind of work with everybody. But if I don't feel your art, I don't want to work with you. Like,
was that something that was starting to happen? Like you were getting hit up about stuff that you were like, I just don't see myself like doing this.
I just passed up a lot of opportunities like that because I would listen to the music and be like, if my heart's not in it, it's not going to be good. So I'm just not going to do, like, I know you're doing this because you think I'm super sick at videos and all, but like I was only super sick at those videos because I really liked the song.
Makes sense though.
Yeah. So it was one of those things where like I won't sacrifice the art for money. That's why I'm still an underground artist to this day. I've been doing this for like 15 years and still an underground artist because I won't sacrifice what I'm doing for a payday because I know how short-lived that is. And it's like popularity also doesn't matter to me if my art sucks or I don't like what I'm doing, So,
it does make a lot of sense. It makes sense because like who knows if you would have not respected yourself and just like do whatever, maybe today you would have get like kind of sick of that, like you know what I mean, after we see
it always catches up.
Cool. So now I'm a big videographer but I'm miserable. What who won there? Like not me.
What's the point?
Like I'd rather be happy and like I say, separate the money from the art to a certain extent. You kind of have to do that. It's hard to do that, especially with how tied together things are these days. And
and you want to be able to live too, right? Like there's money is a factor in life, so it's like
but that was more of like a young man's game where like I was trying to live off my art back then, but not really willing to sacrifice the art part of it, because when a record label's saying, hey, Asking Alexandria is really big right now, Her Demise's next record should sound like Asking Alexandria.
But I hate this
that's
kind
when
of
I'm
sentence.
I
hate that kind of sentence.
But that's the pressure that's put on you as an artist, especially as you're getting bigger. Like I wanted to release Curses, which was going to be our heaviest record after the takeover, because it was kind of like it was kind of like a psych, like we did the takeover as an initial release, and then I was about to release a CD that I considered way ahead of its time Anybody who's heard the riffs off Curses knows that it was like it was essentially Sworn In 5 years before Sworn In.
I mean, it's on the internet. I was listening to
pieces
it
of it.
yesterday.
Yeah. Pieces of it are. Pieces of it are. Not the whole thing, but pieces of it are. And not with Coco as the vocalist. It was always with some other vocalist. So,
Okay.
But like we were going to release the heaviest record we ever released after that. But the label said no. You know, like I'm sending demos of songs and labels like Asking Alexandria does not sound like this. You know, like you're moving the wrong direction.
I get why they're you know, like
they're in it to make money.
Yeah, I understand, but at the same time, it's kind of counterintuitive because like each band, it's like if you would have tell like Immure, oh yeah, but Suicide sounds like that, so you should maybe go like what? Like no, but that's not our sound. Like we have our thing, you know what I mean? So like that that mindset, I could be wrong. It might be still the case today with those big companies, but I feel like it just doesn't work like that. You need to
they don't have as much
unique
control
first.
these days with
Probably
being able
not,
to upload
right?
your own music onto streaming platforms and stuff. Like you're given the choice now. Like even with like Manitum or Heaven Sender, I do what I artistically think is cool. Like I don't have anybody driving it, but that's also because I also self-release everything, so I don't have to feel the weight of a label being like, all right, I guess he wants to put this out. We'll half budget it, and you know, we'll give him like kind of a rollout. Yeah.
Because they tell you it better works out if you don't listen. Type of like so now you release it, but instead of being excited, you're like, I hope it's gonna sell. Type
well, and
thing.
they'll make it flop, so they force your hand to do what they want it to do too. So it's the nicety of it's the nicety of not being a signed artist. Back in the day, that was kind of required. Like, in order for my music to reach outside of my city, I had to be signed.
Official videos and just
being, you know, the same way I kind of grew up. Like when I saw like Trustkill, and I was like, oh no way, Bleeding Through's on Trustkill. I listened to every band on Trustkill. Same with Victory Records. Like, oh no way,
Rise
you know,
Rickard
like not as much Rise, but that was a little bit later.
But the era of the compilation CDs, like the labels had comp CDs and the samplers.
Century
and stuff like
Media
that.
comps were how I got through high school.
You'd get one of these at a fucking like at Warped Tour or whatever fucking show you're going to, and you just listen to all of it. It was just like, okay, let's listen to this entire fucking label's catalog.
Each label had their thing. Metal Blade was like the very metal, almost death metal sounding band.
It was 100% necessary back then, but now I feel like we're getting, because artists are able to self-release and kind of prove it without a label, we're getting more unique stuff these days, you know? Like,
it's less and less relevant to, like, you approach a kid and you're like, hey, you want to get signed, and this kid already got a bigger audience than your entire label type thing.
Exactly.
So you're just
off
like
a TikTok dance. It's crazy.
Yeah. So the kid is just like, well, I make 10-second videos and I'm making money now, and you want me to give you everything I've got? Yeah, no thanks. Hard pass. And they just keep doing their thing. So they don't have the power they had back then.
It's crazy though, because MySpace was like the beginning of that, right?
Yeah.
Like, because you were kind of on the tail end of bands not being like needing a label,
except they were not paying. That's the problem.
The tricky part is MySpace gave you a platform, but it was not necessarily a respected metric. Like internet things today are actually respected metrics. I can tell a label we have a million. I was saying
it was kind of like the tail end, right? Like everything that kind of followed after MySpace kind of became legitimized, because we did see the success stories of bands blowing up through MySpace and getting picked up by big labels and it actually meaning something. Like it eventually started to make sense to people that like, okay, these some bands actually like they made it off of MySpace. Like,
100%,
So I think it like MySpace kind of changed the game in that sense. It didn't work out that way then, but it definitely was like the kind of the
undeniable.
But towards
for that.
Towards the end, just like with the SoundCloud wave and what I say kind of happened to the hyperpop wave, is towards the end of these scenes, the record labels were pretty entrenched and industry planting people like on MySpace and like really pumping numbers and stuff like that. I remember going to a management company's office and seeing 5 computers with this, I forget what it was called, but it was a program that pretty much botted all their artists and being like, oh, this is why these people seem larger than life. their labels botting their MySpace streams, you know?
Have more
Like, so-
plays and
yeah,
appear
yeah,
as a
yeah. It
Yeah,
worked for a lot of people, but
to
the
be
one thing
fair,
I can
did
say
it
is
with
that we
my
never
projects.
did that.
To be fair, what I did with my project, we would put it on repeat always to boost our
The
thing.
most, yeah. The most we did is we used to go to the mall and walk into the Apple store, and I'd put our MySpace profile on every single computer and press play on all of them and mute them. That's the worst I would do, you know?
Yeah, it
And
was
I do
similar
that
to
more because it was funny to me. Like, you know, if someone hits on mute,
Yeah.
they're going to hate this, you know?
Yeah, but it was kind of the metric for, like, if you would, I don't know, like you would find like a new deathcore underground thing, and then like there was a difference between 20 plays and 2,000 plays, right? Like it was just like, oh, okay, something's going on. Like there's a few
It's
like
the same today.
For fans, but yeah.
It's
right.
it's the same today. If I put out a music video that has 1,000 that gets under 1,000 plays, there's a good chance it's not going to hit above 1,000 plays because there's like a weird in people's brain where if it doesn't already have 10K plays, they may not click on it, you know?
And you see, for some people, it does the opposite. For me, I might be
I'm the
intrigued.
same, yeah.
Like
yeah.
if I see like the logo's cool and stuff like that, and there's not a lot of play, I'm like, oh shit, because it's an opportunity to dive into a world where there's not many people, and it's just like you discover this entire thing. Like for me, it's exciting personally.
You're also
but-
sometimes hearing an artist in their most vulnerable form. Like a good example I always use is like a couple years ago, maybe like 4 or 5 years ago, I heard this artist named Glaive, right? I'm sure you've heard Glaive now because he's very popular. But
I'm not
I clicked
sure, but
he's a hyper pop artist
okay, that's
from the East Coast. But I heard him do a cover on SoundCloud, and I just clicked on it because I was like, oh, no way. This is like, it had like 10, 15 plays on it. I was like, oh, this kid did a 303 cover. Oh, let's hear this, you know? And like hearing him do it and be like, oh, he kind of has a style to him. Oh, this is interesting. And then like digging into what he was doing right after that, which like I said, all his songs had like 10, 15 plays on them. And be like, oh, this kid's going to be something. I did the same thing with Little Peep, found Little Peep on SoundCloud, helped him book his first LA show, really liked what he was doing because I heard what people would eventually get to hear is like, you know, like this person has the vulnerability I'm hearing in the music, the heart I'm hearing in the music. It's all there. It checks all the boxes. So like, I can't wait for everybody to see this. So sometimes I'd get that excitement off finding an artist that's that small and being like, I'm not going to do anything. Let's just see what happens. I'm not going to help them. I'm not going to plug them up with a label. I'm not going to book them a show, but I'm a fan. Let me just see what happens. Am I right? Like with this archetype to sound, is it about to reach the masses? And then I've been pretty lucky. I'm pretty on like.
But it's a sort of talent, by the way, like because I think we talked about it last time, but like my friend at the time had this ability to point out someone and be like, he's gonna be big type thing. Yeah. And there's a few people like that who just knows, and I think you're part of that. Like you would see someone and just be like, watch in 2 years that person.
I got in so many arguments with people about artists because they'd be like, they just didn't see it, and I'd be like arguing with them like, you just don't get it, man. Like, and then 2 years later they come back to me like, hey, you know, I kind of bumped that artist now and they're pretty tight, and I'm like, yeah, you know, like. I was listening to Suicide Boys 10 years ago. Like, you know, like they're just now like a thing that people appreciate.
It's also an open mind is that you have personally. Like it's not everybody who's fully prepared to hear something they've never heard and be kind of accepting of it. Like most people are kind of looking for things in
familiar,
sort of their what they hear usually,
or know that it's already got approval, right?
Yeah,
and buy an amount of views or buy other people's comments or popularity.
Yeah, that's never worked for me. You guys ever hear an artist called Young Lean? I mean, you're internet people. Yeah. So like when I heard Young Lean, I was showing that to everybody and everybody just gave me the weirdest looks. Young Lean produces like pop music now, you know, like he's like a humongous artist. It's insane.
Huge,
But like I used to play that stuff for people and they'd look at me like, do you like find the worst stuff on the internet? That's what people used to, but I'm like, no, this is the best stuff on the internet. Your ears just aren't tuned to it, you know, like to appreciate the raw emotion. Because people are so used to hearing things with 15 producers on it, super polished, you know, even in heavy music, there's ghostwriters these days. I've seen it for myself, you know, like
pretty much everywhere. I would
there's
say.
like, well, and in small scenes like this, there should not be ghostwriters. I'm sorry.
No,
like that's crazy to me that bands are getting ghostwriters hoping that it'll help them. How does that help you if you don't know how to write it yourself, you know, like
It's a weird thing though. Like I
but
do
people are so
understand
used to
sometimes
that.
like
Yeah.
just it's okay if sometimes a producer is like, hey, I've got this riff. Like I get it. It's like, oh,
Oh
okay,
yeah,
cool.
yeah.
Like let's include it. But when almost your entire music is just like, well, no, we took this and this, that I don't get. And I think that's part of the we keep here and then because you're in the community, but we keep talking about EPs, right? Like about the Suicide Silence EP or the Chelsea Green EP and that stuff. And I was for a long time wondering why I prefer those to the album, and it's simple. It's because there was no other input. It was them. It was pure. It was their
I
energy. And
I pretty much only put out EPs for that exact same reason too. Is like an energy, like I always say, an EP captures a moment in time. Like in an EP, you can be more, you can do more conceptual things because you're not committing to anything. You're kind of just like, this is my concept and my idea at the time. Let's see if it works. And if it doesn't, maybe the next EP sounds a little different, like Heaven Sender is a good example of that. Of like, I wrote the first EP, we recorded it super quick, listened back to it and went, I think this is missing some things element wise. Like, I think this could be a little bit tougher. So going right to the second EP and writing something more conceptually heavy and darker, but knowing that when I get to the third EP, which I'm writing now, it's not going to be heavier or darker. Like I have a whole other direction to go with this next one. Cause you can do that with EPs. It's such a short pocket of music.
Yeah.
You can kind of test out what you're trying to do,
The experience is cool. It's cooler for the audience too. Like we're super stoked when we hear like an artist we like dropping an EP. I'm like, oh my god, I'm stoked about that because I know it's gonna be like a 5-6 song type thing. We're excited. We can listen to it. It's fluid. It's not too long. There's no 4 songs filler that you're just like, well, that's kind of like the other single, but just a bit different type thing.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
the worst is hearing B-sides on a full length, where you're like, whoa, the B-sides made it to the full length. That's crazy. Yeah.
They're never going to play it live and you know it. You know what I mean? Like you can tell which songs they're never going to do
It's
ever.
super stressful to write a full record too. Like that's one thing I'll always say is like in EP, in order to write an EP, you have to write like 10, 15 songs. So think about a record. Like, how many songs do you have to write to get a good, solid record?
You say that, but dude, I know for a fact in the metal world, most people just write the songs that end up happening on the album and nothing more.
See, and and that's mainly because of time budgeting restraints a lot of things. Because, like, at least in our genre of music, there's not you don't have the luxury of time. Because especially with like heavy music and stuff, anybody who's pushing it kind of any big entity like record label, management company, they kind of see most things as like a flash panic success. We got to cash in off this thing very quickly before the hype dies down. They're not thinking of the longevity of it. So that's why everything
they want to use the moment and the attention.
And that's why the artists always feel like they're in a crunch. Like it's got to be now, fast,
but that's
now,
the
fast.
worst though, because like forcing things is never like we're talking about art and inspiration and stuff like that. So like the more you force it, the more you're like, oh, I gotta write, instead of being like, oh my god, I have this, let's do it. Like
on the other hand, you have artists like Tool who took 10 years to release a record. Was that too long? Because
the problem with that is the
legal
expectations
battles too. Yeah, the expectation, and that's the challenge too. Is like, the record label wants you to do it fast because they also understand. And this is me on the flip side, counterbalancing my argument. But they also they understand that you don't have a lot of time to do this, but you need to do it now. Like, because if you wait too long, the expectations will build up, and then no matter what you do, you failed. Because it's. Yeah. It just doesn't hit like the old stuff.
It's the worst. People stop caring, and they care more than ever at the same. Like when it does come out, like it's kind of like a double-edged sword.
But you can kind of tell, like when I do research for a band on the channel, I can tell which album was rushed and which album they took time to have an entire concept with the art, with the songs, like a song finish and it's super fluid with the next one starting. There's this big thing, lyrics and like little Easter eggs and whatnot. Like you can tell when there's like time in something, but I get the counter argument of like, if you're too perfectionist and you lose the momentum of of what you were supposed to do, you're still not winning though. Like, oh, I want it to be perfect, and you release it like 4 years later when things have changed, and you know, like
that's why I don't sit on music either, is like, you know, because you can sit on it and tweak it for 4 years and make it perfect, but at the same time, happy mistakes, you know, like art is art at the end of the day, and some of those flaws are you know, characteristics of the music at the same time. Like,
yeah,
I listen to the Manitou EP sometimes and be like, man, I should have played that a little cleaner. But like, also understanding me playing it a little looser was like that old school deathcore vibe, and it's like, ooh, if I tighten that up, these might sound like MIDI guitars, you know, like, so that balance, you know.
Right,
yeah.
and I think we're always gonna be not the most
You're your
objective
own
about
worst critic too.
Yeah, exactly. About your
you're
own music and stuff like that. And there's
you
always
hear it
something you
so
could have done
many
more and stuff, right?
times
So it's,
too. When you work on something, though, I don't know. I'm gonna talk for myself, but like sometimes it's like I heard it too much for today. That part, like I'm gonna revisit it.
but it's also you grow. Like Jake said this multiple times throughout this talk. Like you grow as an artist as well, right? So like you just are in another place the second you're done with whatever music you're working on. So obviously, like the lens that you look at the music through is going to be different already once you moved on to something else. And there's always something that could have been done different. But I think to your point, Jake, like it's about capturing a vibe, capturing a moment in time. And like we're talking about, like, okay, you do an EP, it was like quicker to do, but like it is what it is. Like, sure, it could have made the guitars tighter or this or that, but like in that moment, that's what you felt was the best thing for the songs, and that's what made it, and that's what counts, and that's what people either resonate with or don't resonate with, but like that's what it is, right? And I think
as long as it's real,
that's what makes art. Like that's
and that's also why I will never bring Her Demise My Rise back, you know, like because of those moments in time, and because you don't want to ruin.
Don't want to try to recreate something, or
sometimes you can really ruin it. Like you can. Really
it doesn't feel right to me as an artist to essentially ride off a decade old success that I had a decade later. It doesn't feel very honorable to me. It feels like I'm using the thing that I worked really hard. I'm kind of exploiting the thing I worked at, you know, like worked hard to give it the longevity long term of like people appreciating it today. Like, I feel like I'm just abusing that power at that point.
And it makes it sometimes less special too, right? Like sometimes like artists comes back and then the way you were seeing that band or that music just changed.
That band was sick too. That band used to be sick.
Yeah.
Where I'd rather reinvent myself, start a new band, you know, take the risk. I know a lot of artists are afraid of doing that, especially after you've been a part of something big, like, because anything technically you do after being part of something big is a failure, you know, like, because it will never live up to that thing. Like, I have to see messages about my old projects all the time in my inboxes, you know, but at the same time, I know I have really cool stuff I'm working on today, so it doesn't bother me.
Yeah, and it's still you carry it with you no matter what, though, because like those riffs, these things that you did back then, it's like if personally I love an artist or I love, you know, like a certain band, I'm always going to be excited to see what the people in that
you're
project
also
are
very
doing
rare.
now.
Yeah, you're also very rare, because even if you look at bigger bands, like, I mean, I'm gonna use a really big one here, like Jason Newsted of Metallica. How many Flotsam and Jetsam songs you bump, you know? Like when he broke out of Metallica, how many fans did he really bring with him, you know? Like I kind of always think that, I always think that way, because like I grew up watching those documentaries and those things, so I always kind of had an understanding of like, I'm Jake playing in this band right now, but if I leave this band right now or I do something different, I have to start all over again. I like anything I got from this band does not translate over to.
Well,
the
we
next thing.
saw it a few
Besides skill.
times. We
Besides
saw it a
skill.
few times, to be fair. I mean, if we talk about Danny from Asking Exandria going country, it didn't really translate.
It's a challenge, yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
and
Yeah, and we've seen examples of it working too, but I think those are few and far between, right?
Yeah,
I think it's just
No, it's true,
there's
yeah.
also a difference between like being an icon of a band,
Yeah.
you know, like being the very front and center person of a band, and then being another member, for lack of a better
And
of
being
lack
a
of a better
rhythm-
word, regardless of your involvement. Like you could have written all the music, but that doesn't. That's not
rhythm
what
guitar
people see.
players get no love either. I'll
Yeah.
say that much, you know, because I'm I'm not necessarily like a lead shredder by any means, but like rhythm guitar players get no love, and you know we write a lot of the riffs, you know, so it's
But that's not what people care about. It's like
no,
it's
not.
It's weird in that
not.
sense.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
they want like the face of the band and stuff like that. And then I was about to prove that example, because I was about to say, like, to me, Ricky Hoover could have been part of anything, and I would be like listening to it, right? Like country music, I would have been like, oh sure. Like Mitch Schlucker could have started rapping, and I would have been intrigued, and I would have listened to it. But you're right about
Like
that.
I said,
the
it's,
behind
you're
the
like a
scenes.
special type of person though. Like I kind of think the same way. Like, you know, Getter the DJ decides to, you know, start rapping as Tara Reid. I'm in. I'm bumping all the Tara Reid stuff because I like Getter as a DJ. You know what I'm saying? Like, not a
that's
lot of
alright.
people do that though, is what I've learned. I mean,
No, you're right. You're right.
We're-
It's
we're
because
you gotta
real
think
nerds here.
Manitou, Manitou is a sub 500 monthly listener project, you know, and I'm fine with that. But it's like, you know,
I see a lot of people saying that it's very underrated, though. Like, to be fair, I see those because, like, I feel it's one of those things where if more people would just hear it.
Yo,
it's-
100%.
It's just that, you know, it's not because there's something, it's just if it's, you just need people to hear it and they're going to be like, oh, that's super sick. That's the challenge of today, right?
one thing I'm not good at though is new age internet marketing. It's some of the things I see are just kind of cringy to me. So like,
Oh my God. Yes.
and
no,
a
that's
lot
true.
like the, oh my God, I can't believe this guy reviewed my music. And then I go message the guy and he's like, it costs $300 to review your music. And I'm like, well, wait, that wasn't a real reaction then. Oh wait,
No, but
so all these
almost-
reactions are fake.
You know these videos
Oh, God,
when they
like,
act
that's not
like
fair
they-
to me, you know?
You know these reels when somebody walks in the room and they're pretending that he found the person on the piano starting a new
Yeah.
song and everything. It's just like I respect. It's fine. I get what you're doing. It works. It's super cool. But to me though, like it's just like I don't think I could do something like I would rather have way less people and just release the music and just be like, that's my song, fuck with it or not,
Yeah,
that's cool, than to be like, oh my God, like telling my friend, okay, so what are you gonna do? You're gonna walk in my room and then I'm gonna put the light and everything, and then I'm gonna pretend that I'm writing the breakdown that's already written like since 6 months ago, but nobody knows that, and just pretend you discovered me, but write that I suck, like, oh my God, he's never gonna
Yeah.
make it type thing, so that people can empathize in the comments. I know what people are doing,
Yeah,
and
I
I
get
know
the
it
strategies. Yeah,
Yeah.
they're fine, but like I mean, you guys see, I little to no internet presence, mainly not be. I don't necessarily like being the face of things either, you know. So like, I more or less am just. You see, I'll pop on and be like, "Yo, new music video," and then I'm back to recording. I'm back in the studio.
That's cool, though,
I'm
to
spending
me.
my time doing the things that are valuable to me, you know, like. Maybe one day I'll be like, check out this new TikTok dance for Manitou, and you guys will get a kick out of that. But that'll probably never happen, to be honest with you.
Dude,
You know,
I'll
like
be hon-
I'm just not that type of. I'm not like an internet personality. I've always been kind of, you know, fly on the wall, kind of like I've been in rooms with a lot of big artists and stuff, and kind of just soak it in and learn and understand more than being the big loud entity in the room. You know, look at me, pay attention to me type of person. You know, like it's either my art speaks for itself or I starve to death. Simple as that, you know?
But I do believe in that, though. As much as you can have a strategy and stuff like that, like sometimes the music is loud enough to have, you know, the reaction that it should have, you know, like
yeah, but it needs to be found. That's always that's what you were saying earlier, right? So that's where all these strategies
that's
come
the challenge.
in and promo
and that's
and
where
all this
like
stuff, right? Like
that's where I give props to bands like, you know, like Girl of Glass. Like, I'm not saying they do any of like that TikTok stuff. They just more their promotional mindset on how they rolled out their stuff. And the band you guys talk about every single podcast and we haven't brought up yet, so I'm gonna say it. Cyclotron.
oh fuck.
Oh, they're on point.
I've got the counter ready.
You got the bingo card? Yeah, you got the bingo
well,
card.
There we go. Boom.
Killing it.
No one said it in a while, so I figured, you know, I'd throw it out. But like bands like that, where it's like, you know, they were able to produce awesome music and also market themselves online very well. So they're kind of winning right now, you know. And I bump both those bands a ton because they're doing awesome stuff.
Yeah, it's always cool to see, like, but it does makes me, you know, because I live my life on YouTube, right? Like, I'm not like I'm gonna repeat it. Everybody keeps telling every content creator I'm talking with, like bigger content creator, are like, dude, you should you should do some stuff on TikTok. I so don't like this application, unfortunately. Maybe in the future I was thinking maybe just vocals or something, but I'm like, oh, but YouTube, I spend a lot of time on YouTube, and sometimes I find a band, honestly, and it's so sick, and my brain is just like, why? It should have more. It's so fucking sick, but it's just, unfortunately, it doesn't work like that. Sometimes it's not, they didn't do anything wrong. They just didn't have the momentum required.
They didn't, you know, there's so many different things that can get in your way as you're growing. Maybe it's the look of the artist. Maybe it's, you know, the branding, you know, there's so many things that you can do wrong in that, like, that it could be one of those things, you know, like, hey,
you
maybe
need to check everything at the right time. That's very tricky.
Maybe the logo I used for Manitum at the beginning wasn't the right logo, so it didn't draw the attention. Like, you know,
I do prefer the newest one you have to be.
Yeah, that one was more MySpace, like themed, you know, like more old school vibes in the new one. So but the funny thing is like the old one was done by Kalian Stokerman. I don't know if you guys know who that is. But he's the guy who did the Lorna Shore logo and like the Mirror Lore logo.
I've just never heard his name out loud, I think.
Okay. And I'm probably butchering it, by the way, so sorry, bro.
It's such a weird, he does a bunch of really cool stuff.
Yeah, but he did that one for us. So it's like, you know, like I thought it was a great, cool logo, you know, but
it was cool, but
the second one worked out better because every time I posted that one, they were like, oh, great, another Lorna Shore ripoff. And I'm like, did you listen to the music? Are you literally saying we're a ripoff because you looked at the logo?
Because it needs to represent, right? Like I keep thinking about Diarist Murder, right? The first logo they had with Infinite Death, it was perfect, and then they changed it with the new direction, and to it was just not speaking to me the same way, the image and everything. I was like, kind of. I feel like the other
Joel's
one
in the
was
chat
more.
Too.
Hey Joel, what's going on?
Joel's vocalist of Manitum. If you guys
Let's go.
You know, formal after the burial, or after the burial. I was talking with someone else earlier, not after the burial, a Black Rose burial.
Yeah, but still, So I feel like it's a combination of everything. The only thing that sucks a little bit for a lot of bands is just like they're gonna have to do things they would never promote their bands like that, but they're just like, guys, like that's what works.
It's all in what you want at the end of the day. I always say, if you want to be the biggest band, if that's your goal, is like to be the biggest band in a scene, you're going to have to do every single one of those things. But I mean, I've been doing this a long time, so that's not a goal of mine. That was really never the goal to begin with. To be honest, it was play cool shows, play with bands I love listening to, and I mean, you can do it my way too and still win, is kind of what I'm saying. You don't have to always be chasing something that 1% of the artists get, you know?
Yeah,
because remember, like,
everybody.
Yeah, look at a lot of the artists I used to work with and you know, hang out with. They're all big artists now. So like it is possible. But it's also possible to be on my side and still be respected and still, have, your vibes.
Oh, definitely, and you don't have to give in the trends and stuff like that. If we're talking about the big, like, look at, for example, Bring Me the Horizon, right? They're huge, but they're doing what the hell they want.
They do exactly
release
what they
the music
want.
they want. It works. Like, look at Immure. Like, they're not like, oh my god, let's do this trend on that. They're just doing their thing, releasing music, and it works. It's just. I don't know. It's
Sometimes not paying attention to all the outside noise, like a lot of the bands you're saying right now, because I still talk with Frankie and Amir. He's still a good friend of mine. But these are people who just don't, no outside noise gets into their circle, like it's one of those things too, where like, they're not really listening to what's out there. They're just doing them.
I connect with.
You have to be off the internet almost for that though. Now it's hard. It's hard to be like that now because everything is so connected and out there, and you're kind of expected to interact to a certain extent on socials, even if it's not TikTok dance. It's just having some sort of presence. Right?
Having some presence.
Right. So it's hard to be in a position where like you're doing the right thing for the band, but at the same time you're not having any of that feedback in. Like it's so intrinsic now to having it be a two-way street. For better or for worse.
It's always a flip of a coin too, because like you can overshare too as a band. Like some people like a little mystery, and some people like overshare.
We're missing that now
way
for
too
sure.
much. Yeah, like I don't want to know what the guitar player ate for lunch. Like, I want to know what riff he wrote today.
Dude, look, Sleep Token is amazing. And I love Sleep Token. No shade towards Sleep Token, but a big part of Sleep Token is the fact that it's anonymous, right?
Yeah.
Like that's a big
part. It has a lot of mystery to it. Yeah.
Right. And dude, and in a world where we don't have that anymore, it's like even more of a thing, right?
Exactly.
But that used to be the norm. Like everyone, like rock stars were untouchable, unattainable, there was no way to DM slash.
I mean, Slipknot, even when they released, like, the internet wasn't big. Everybody would have known every band member's name the first day Slipknot released, But back in the day, it was so mysterious. We didn't know people from Iowa. We didn't have any connection to know that the number one was X member and this, like all that stuff. It was just a bunch of mass dudes going crazy on stage, like. But now, the internet will ruin that so quickly for a lot of the mystery of the band.
But it would create. I'm always gonna remember my stepbrother. Because I was young when I discovered Slipknot. It was my first really heavy band after like Linkin Park and stuff like that. And I remember asking him, why are they wearing masks? And I'm always going to remember his answer. Like it was like a bullshit, rumor. He said, because what they say is so intense that they don't want and that they go too hard with what they say. But it worked on me.
Yeah,
I was like,
oh
shit, that's so sick.
I remember.
So it creates these,
have you ever seen Welcome to Our Family by Slipknot? It's like their first cassette. I'm showing my age right now for sure, but they had a cassette called Welcome to Our Family. And I remember them saying some stuff like, more or less like the masks captured the sound that they were trying to show. Like, like kind of that vibe, which
first
was always
masks were
interesting
so
to me.
sick, by the way. Just want to say that the first masks they had were so. No, it's not just a nostalgic thing. Like compare them, and it was so sick. So awesome.
They had an aesthetic, and it was one of those ones where like I was always fascinated with Slipknot. To this day still am. It was a full vibe. It was more than just I have a giant Slipknot S tattooed on my leg, so like I'll always be a fan,
So let's be honest though. People can pretend as much as they want, but we all love it. Like pretty much everyone
everybody used to hate nu metal too, and I was like, you guys don't like Limp Bizkit? Like everybody, I think people just they hate whatever makes them seem cooler, or whatever the cool kids hate.
Yes. And then years later, they were like, yeah, I like.
Now everybody listens to Limp Bizkit.
Now people are paying $400 a ticket to go see Limp Bizkit. Yeah.
People were making fun of me. I remember that. I remember people making fun of me because I liked Roll In and those songs, and people would be like, "You listen to that crap?"
Those are
and
bangers,
I love that music, and then people would make fun of me and stuff. So it's always Immure was the same thing, by the way. Same thing.
Yeah, I never let anybody, especially touring with them early, like knowing them as people. Anytime anybody's like, "Oh, that band's whack," and I was like, "You just don't get it." It's cool. You're not one of us. No big deal.
Exactly. I'm so glad, by the way, that you confirmed, because like when I did my Immure video, I didn't know Frankie at all, but my impression was just like everybody's saying crap. It's just bullshit. He seems like an awesome dude. That was my perception. So I
He's
literally
amazing,
said it in the video because I watch so many interviews and stuff. I'm like, what the hell are people talking about? He's a great person.
If you really think about it, he has no reason to. I mean, I was on a tour with him in Carnifex, 15 years ago. He has no reason to talk to me ever, but he'll message me, see how I'm doing. I'll do the same. You know, like that's the person you see online, and the entity, you know, that was created isn't always the entity that, you know, like,
for sure.
Like people say I suck on the internet, but I think I'm generally a nice person, you know? Like,
well, I'm
but it's
in
perception.
A good place to say it.
Maybe you said, hey, I want to talk. And I was like about to go on stage and I was like, I can't right now, you know? And you took that as like a blunt, you know, F off. Yeah. And, you know, it's perception sometimes.
Sometimes
like,
it's
you know,
just anxiety.
It
could be a moment you're in something and you're just like react badly.
Or maybe something bad happened at home and I'm on
Yeah.
tour and I can't handle what's going on at home. You know, you just never know, you know, like what people are going through.
An impression is an impression.
Yeah. I always give people the benefit of the doubt, you know, when it comes to those things, and like really learn to know a person before judging them, you know, because like half the people I've hung out with artistically, you know, like I had to get to know. I couldn't go off of public perception because like, you know, it doesn't always work that way. Like Ollie Sykes, if I went off public perception when I met him and he went, go to the Drop Dead booth and get whatever you want, you know, like, and let me fill up on Drop Dead gear, and, you know, really helped out Her Demise in the beginning. Like, would not have expected that from Ollie Sykes, you know, everybody would talk about and how controversial he was.
Yeah, people were
the nicest guys I've
shitting
ever
on
met.
big time on him, saying he's this and this. And then I meet people who knows him and they're just like, no, he's great. He's a cool guy. So I was just like, okay, so.
But sometimes I feel like that's what it takes, especially as a frontman, to get super, you know, iconic. You know? Like all these rumors and all. I wonder how he is, you know, like it's a little bit of that mystery there too. So.
Oh, it's part of it, definitely, because if you just leave people indifferent.
I did see something in chat, and I figured I'd respond to it.
I was going to go there, so go for it.
Okay, so the Auto Peasy, what happened to Hollow Crown? If you're still here, Auto Peasy, Hollow Crown was a project with the other. So if you guys don't know, Yan and Dom, like Hollow Crown was a project I did with the guitar player, like one of my old friends who is also the guitar player, Her Demise My Rise, where I was doing the vocals and he was kind of writing the music. But yeah, just
has Zach in there too for a bit, right?
Yeah, Zach from So This Is Suffering was playing drums and helped us out a little bit too. But yeah, so with that project, it was more just like I had like ideas on direction and how I kind of wanted to approach the project, and we were writing a new EP, and we kind of just weren't seeing eye to eye on what we wanted to release as music. I don't know if you guys know this, but I am just not a fan of gent music, like at all. Like just can't get me into it.
That was that era.
Yeah.
Or on the tail end of it, at least.
Yeah, you can't pay me to listen to gent, is what I'm saying. Like, you know,
we have those conversations pretty often.
I'm just not a fan. Yeah, I'm just not a fan. Yeah. There are bands from those eras that I respect a ton, like Villains, or I think they're called Youth Forever is what they changed their names to, or like Barrier and stuff like that. But
those were kind of like the new, people called it like new metal deathcore.
Yeah, exactly.
Like,
exactly.
It was kind of it was bouncy in the same way as gent was, but without any of the prog stuff attached.
And
that's
I like stuff like that.
Deathcore.
I always
was kind of falling into that too.
Monsters
and it was
too.
good.
They were awesome. Yeah, they were awesome as well. So like I like stuff like that, but was never a big gent fan and progressive. I'm like generally just not a progressive fan. Like personally, like not a huge Arcspire. Like kind of like that genre of music fan, mainly because it's just like it never really caught. The only thing that ever caught my ear in the progressive like genre was Between the Buried and Me, realistically. Sure. And like the Human Abstract, you know, like some stuff from like earlier on.
Protest maybe.
Protest the Hero a little bit too, yeah.
Sure.
But for the most part, not a big like gent guy. So like the reason why.
Sorry, Jake, but someone in the chat mentioned Structure. It was sick too. Structure.
Wasn't that
Substructure, which is another
my
band,
god! It's because I have something that blocks my stream. But
Structures were great too.
But Structures,
I'll check that out actually. Yeah.
But they were
Sorry, Paramore, but But thank you for reminding me of structures.
That's actually he's the bass player, Heaven Sender. So what's up?
Oh, cool. Yeah. What's up, dude?
What's up?
Yeah, he was previously in We Are the End and another band from this area called To Something Beautiful.
Wow,
cool.
Yeah. But so Hollow Crown pretty much just didn't see eye to eye musically on how we wanted to do things. And I was already starting to build a little bit more confidence in my writing again. So I figured I would stop doing Hollow Crown and try to do something more along the lines of the stuff I wanted to write. So that's when I pretty much just stopped Hollow Crown to do Manitomb, and then just do Manitomb and Heaven Sender now. But it was like I had to make a choice.
Which is enough.
And I'm not a vocalist either, so it was more just me experimenting and trying something different. Like, I always think it's good to do that and put your headspace in those areas, because as like a music writer in general, I want to know how like vocals are kind of structured over stuff. Like I want to learn all the aspects.
Gives you perspective for sure.
Yeah, exactly. So it gives me a lot more understanding, and also makes me more impressed when I hear what my vocalists do over stuff, because I was like, ooh, I wouldn't have thought of that, you know? Like, so, but yeah, that was just like kind of like a fun project I was doing just to get like, kind of dip my toes back in the water. So
yeah, it was cool. It was kind of like Sworn in Immure by Bits too. Like it was, I don't know. Those are kind of the two influences I was hearing when I was listening.
I was just trying to scream like Jamie Josta, "Hey Breathe." Like that was kind of but I never really got it. So
I'd have one last little thing to ask you before I let you go, because we've been at it for over 2 hours now. But
oh my god,
wow.
Time flies when you're having fun. But I read somewhere, the question posed was, when you are on stage, what do you fear most? And your response was eating shit off the side of the stage. It's happened a few times, is what you mentioned. So
where did you find that? That is awful. I don't know where you dug that up from, but it is 100% true.
So talk to us about eating shit off the side of the stage.
So here's a fun one. This is probably the most embarrassing one, so I'll let this one loose. We're playing the Whiskey A Go-Go in Hollywood. Dino Casares of Fear Factory is on the second balcony watching us.
Legend.
It's a Carnifex show, so that was Carnifex era stuff. But we are about to, embarrassingly enough, play our intro, which was just Let the Bodies Hit the Floor by Drowning Pool. And we're jumping on stage, like kind of hyping before, the Let the Bodies Hit the, and this, I guess that makes it even more embarrassing, because as he's saying Let the Bodies Hit the Floor, if you ever been, I don't know if you guys have been to the Whiskey or played the Whiskey, but that venue is, the stage is literally 9 feet high.
Oh my!
With a sheer fall off on stage left, which I'm stage right, which I'm stage right normally. Mm-hmm. So I'm just, hopping, and eventually I just hop to the point where I just keep going. I'm just falling at this point, and I'm just like, oh no! It like the fall was so long, holding my guitar in the air. I was just like, I ruined the band, like, like just in the air. Like I slam onto the ground, literally, like, because I'm protecting my guitar, so not paying attention to my body, slam onto the ground in front of the Fear Factory guitar player, and like literally get up while playing the riff and run back up the stairs and just keep the set going. But like,
that's pretty real though.
That is not the first time that happened. It's pretty common that I get really excited when I see a big crowd in front of me, and I kind of just blank out because it's all muscle memory. Like I'm not thinking of the riffs I have to play. We practiced them so much that I just know that like fluidity happens. So I'm not really thinking of even the riffs. I kind of just blur out a little bit. So there's been a couple times where I've blurred out and either fell off the stage or stomped so hard into the stage that my foot went straight through it, and I'm like now stuck, like trying to awkwardly pull my leg out of the stage. Because me and Coco used to have that competition of who can stomp harder.
Right. I
like,
saw Coco a few videos of Coco going all in on the stomp.
Yeah, he won most of. I think that was the only time I won, and it was only because my foot went straight through straight through. And he's like, "Hey, you win that one." But yeah, we used to have competitions like that, and yeah, I've definitely felt. I don't know where you found that from. I'm assuming something the old bass player Stevie posted somewhere, because he loves to roast me for that, because Stevie saw every single one of those, and they were. I was always super embarrassed, because I'm like this little scene kid, like trying to keep my image up, and
right,
I'm over here
look like the tough guy,
embarrassingly falling off stages, like so. But I think it's hilarious now, because it was like one of those things, like I never got hurt, so it's one of those youthful energy things of like, you fall down really hard, you spring back up. Shout out to skateboarding, because that's probably why I was able to bail. I bailed off those stages so flawlessly. Yeah,
another portion of the muscle memory that kicks in.
Exactly. Yeah, as you're falling, you're like your brain's like roll. Like
yeah. That's skateboarding.
Yeah,
that's so good, dude. Well, man, thank you so much for taking the time to do this, man. This was this was a long time coming, so I'm glad we were able to finally link up and do this. And dude, we've had so much to talk about, but still so many more things we could talk about. So we're gonna have you back on the show.
And you guys know, anytime I hang out, regardless. And as I always say, thank you to you guys for preserving the scene, giving kids like me a place to hang out and talk about all this stuff that like nobody, like I can't walk into the real world and be like, you ever hear the first Suicide Silence EP? People be like, what is this dude talking about? So like, it's cool to have rooms like this where, we can hang out and chat about this stuff and people aren't like looking at us weird, so I appreciate you guys a ton. I'm a fan more than anything. So thank you guys. And anyone in chat who hasn't checked out Manitum, we just put out a new EP not too long ago, called Damage Over Time. And I have a second project that is literally rolling out right now. We just released 2 music videos. We're kind of starting the first EP rollout on Spotify, as well as the next EP I just finished writing. It's in production mode. So Heaven Sender, if you haven't checked out Heaven Sender, if you like more moshy core stuff, Heaven Sender's kind of the vibe. If you like, blast beats and breakdown, Manitum's kind of the vibe. So I got 2 moods. Those are both of them. So, if you're interested, check them out.
They fit pretty well hand in hand. If you like one, I think the other is usually not too far off for people to enjoy. Yeah.
Yeah. But thank you guys for giving, even me a platform to even, say promote my music and show off my music, because it is very appreciated. And without you guys, I don't know where the scene would be, like we need people categorizing and, documenting these things for everybody, like not just for, our generation, but the generations after that, to see, where this music came from, because we're getting farther and farther away from the source of truth, so
yep,
we need
memories starting to fade. So even our own memories are starting to fade. We gotta try to remember while we still have it in there.
That's why I'm doing my old channel. It's just for me to remember later. I'm just like, okay, so now I'm never gonna forget it.
It helps me remember too, so I appreciate it. But yeah, like I said, thank both of you.
Our
guys
pleasure,
for doing what
dude.
You're doing for
yeah,
the
our
scene.
pleasure. It's super humbling to hear you say all that. Thank you so much, dude.
It's very kind, but like we're just know that we're having an absolute blast doing all of it. Seriously, like we keep talking about it. We're just like, after off stream, we're always like, I cannot believe that this is what we do.
Before we go, I wanted to let Yan know I do have a gift for him. I'm gonna have to mail it, but I'm gonna show you it now, because I've been saving it for you.
Oh, that's so sick.
Oh, no, it's upside down. And just so you know.
Dude, the whole spread is so sick, dude.
Yeah, I'll show you the one I saved for you, which is...
Dude.
Comes with all this extra cool. Shout out Silverback Gorilla Records, too, to be honest. Like,
dude, that's a staple. That's like...
Preserving history.
Oh my god! Yeah,
Killed that release. Curly with the art is fucking insane on reimagining that art and everything.
I don't know if you guys know this, but Curly does like almost all my projects.
All your shit
stuff.
now, yeah.
I love Curly. He is the best artist in the game. So if you're not using Curly, hit up Curly. But I've been saving this for you, Yan. So just know that this will be coming to you soon.
I'm super stoked, dude. I just saw it's freaking amazing.
Yeah. It's cooler in person too. Don't worry. So
it was already cool. So
yeah, I got one of those saved for you. So
I'll be honest with you. I saw the cover and I was already like tripping. So it's
collector's pieces, man. We're never gonna print them again, and I figured who's better to have one than someone who literally helped document, us on the internet and keep preserving our history. So thank you, like I said.
Oh, dude, thank you. I'm super excited, and it was an absolute pleasure. Like, I don't want to still bring it up, but like, to me, it's just unreal to be even able to, like, it's a big honor to be able to tell a story. Like, so seriously, like, I keep saying I love what I do, but it is an honor to be.
I told a lot of people no, and tell you too, because a lot of people ask me for that, the inside scoop to make YouTube videos, but you seem like the person that made the most sense, because you actually seem like you cared about the music. I sense those things at times. So like, it worked out. Like I said, you gained a new fan. Both of you guys gained a new fan, even, doing that and kind of exposing me to what you guys are doing, like, so like I said, I'm a fan. I'll be hanging out in chat regardless, if I'm
and we're gonna have you on
like that, so.
other time, because you won't stop doing any time. You won't stop doing using. Obviously, I feel like you're gonna do it for the rest of your life.
We're cranking it up. This next year is gonna go even harder than the last 2 years of releases have, just because now I have the machine to start rolling things out with. So yeah, shout out to my engineer Scott too. I know he's probably watching. Thank you, Scott, for putting up with all the mixing changes I have you do all the time.
Yeah, but we're gonna invite you for sure, dude.
Anytime, like I said, I'll be hanging out in chat regardless, listening to all the cool stories of either my friends or people I've always considered colleagues. So
Oh, you're gonna see his familiar faces in not too long. I feel like.
Fantastic!
So.
Yeah, always excited. So always excited. Like I say, I watch the YouTubes when I miss the podcast and stuff. So yeah,
awesome. Thanks, dude.
Cool, man. Great talking with you, dudes. Man. Always. Yeah.
Absolutely, man. We'll keep in touch either way. We'll see you in chat.
Hell yeah.
And we'll talk to you soon, man.